One day, the hero, faced with soul-destroying black magic, fell into a deep sleep, leaving his companions behind. And 300 years have passed since then. But the restored peace and calm everyday life were only an illusion. And now the whole world is shrouded in darkness. 300 years ago, when the main character turned 31, one hero came to the magic tower for him. The girl said that she had heard that once every 100 years a genius magician appears, and she asked him if it was him, calling him a boy. Archmage Lin just looked at the girl silently, slamming the book he was holding in his hand shut. Still silent, he approached the bookshelf and, under the gaze of the stranger, put it away from the shelf. Ignoring the girl behind him, Lin began to sort through the books that were lying on the floor, and the girl decided to call out to him, asking him if he could hear her at all. With a stone face, the guy replied that he was neither a genius nor a child, and his name was Lin. The girl beamed and ran up to the guy, saying that he really was the youngest 4-star archmage in history, and she said that she had come to the right place then. She smiled, looked at the boy's back and said that he was still a child. Laughing, she said that it was hard to call him a genius magician when he still needed to change diapers. She continued asking him to join her party, and then she would change them for him every day. Lin turned around with a dark face. A fireball was shining in his hand. The girl immediately tried to back away, shouting at him not to rush in such a hurry because she was only joking. Without looking where she was going, the stranger crashed headfirst into a bookcase. The books that stood in tall stacks on the cupboard swayed and fell down like rain. The orb in Lin's hand went out, and he stared at the stranger who was buried under those books. Seeing such a sight, the guy could not help but smile and laugh. The girl climbed out of the books and laughed too, and that's when Lin became interested in her. The girl introduced herself by saying that her name was Esther Alter Chiprin, and she said that she was a fake warrior of the Heavenly Light Dragon Church. Esther asked Lin to help her defeat the void spreading from the young pole. In other words, she invited him to join her group of heroes. Esther's group already included 2 famous people, the famous archer of the Kaya's Empire and the fire dragon priestess from the Dragon Republic, Frida. In response to this proposal, Lin told Esther that he did not want to die, to which the girl asked who did. The guy asked the girl if he was as interested in those 2 as she was. Esther laughed and replied that they were as crazy as she was. But there was something even more interesting. When Lin asked her what it was, the girl replied that it was peace, a word that caused a strange dissonance in Lin, a man who had studied magic in the tower after being rescued from the slums. He had a goal to become the highest-ranking mage in the Empire, a 7-star rank mage. It was said that if you reached the 7th star, you could see the truth of the world, and Lin wanted to reach a dimension where no one had ever stepped before. Living here and reading books about magic for the rest of my life wouldn't be bad. But to reach the 7th star, he needed to know about the world outside the magic tower. However, aimless travel seemed tiresome to him, and he wondered whether he needed it at all. And then this clumsy heroine appeared and offered him to save the world. And this unexpected offer was enough to pull him out into the outside world. Even though he didn't have a burning sense of justice to save the world, he accepted it. Kaze was an archer whose accuracy dropped catastrophically without drink. He was also mute. Frida the priestess was a heavy smoker. She said that, as a priestess of the fire dragons, she should at least be able to cast a breathing spell, and then she would blow black smoke into Lin's face, giving out a crazy laugh. After this, a monster could suddenly appear and attack with loud screams. And although the party members had their shortcomings, they were masters of their craft. This monster prepared to attack people, and its eye lit up with a green light. But before he could do anything, a bright flash of light had already curled up in Frida's hand, blinding him. And then a huge wave of fire headed towards the monster. The party was strong. The terrible monsters they encountered on their way and the minions of the abyss approaching the server were nothing to them. Esther often joked with Lin. She would tell him not to dare fall in love with her. In the evening, she asked him when it would all end, and if he wanted to go on a trip with her. While Frida was fighting the bat, Esther nonchalantly told Lin that she was afraid that he would be deceived by another girl, since he was so innocent. And thus, in the company of his companions, Lin spent 5 years. As their journey to save the world from the abyss came to an end, Lin's body began to show signs of erosion. This was the result of 5 years of being attacked by enemies. Before the final battle with the abyss, he was dying, consumed by the poison that poisoned his soul. Kaze stared sullenly at the ground as Esther called out to Lin, urging him to wake up. She asked Frida to do something, but she replied that she could not lift this curse. Tears streamed down Esther's face when she was told it could not be healed. The girl protested and screamed that Lin could not die like that. But Lin muttered that he did not want to die. Esther screamed that she knew. She would find a way, he just had to hold on. Suddenly, Lin began to cough, drops of blood escaping from his mouth as he clutched his clothes tightly. Lifting his jacket, he showed his companions the seal on his chest, telling them not to worry too much. As it turned out, it was the tiny overlord's filter lapel, an immortality spell carved into his heart. It contained magic that would put his body into a dormant state and heal him. Lin muttered a spell, and his body began to be covered in ice. He didn't know how long it would take him to revive, but it was the only option. Esther watched with wide eyes as ice covered the boy's body. Lin tugged weakly at her cloak and told her that he would be back. He chuckled and asked her with all his might to win. Smiling, Esther promised that she would do it. She told him that no matter what, they must meet again. Taking his hands, she said with a smile that then the four of them would go see the world. She told him that she would be by his side until he woke up. Lin smiled at her, promising that she would, and the ice had already reached his head. Lin's consciousness was being pulled into the cold grip of death. He felt buoyant and empty, as if he was sinking into a swamp. Finally, he thought about the fact that he still couldn't see the truth from the magical system of the seventh star. Lin sank deeper and deeper into oblivion. Meanwhile, Esther, Kaze, and Frida returned to the fight. Their journey together across the vast world ended here. It ended in front of the army of the Abyss, which rushed forward with terrible screams. All that was left in front of Lin was darkness. But in an instant, he was already tired of floundering in the darkness. Lin opened his eyes. A female voice came from the side asking him if he was okay, and the woman reflected back to him as rain. Turning around at the sound of the voice, Lin immediately addressed her as his mother. Lin's appearance was now different. His hair was black and his eyes were red, and he looked like a teenager. Lin immediately stopped short, thinking about where his mother came from, since he was an orphan, and the woman looked at him questioningly. A bright light shone somewhere to the side and Lin covered his face with his hand, shielding himself from it. Looking around, he realized that he did not recognize these places. Next to him was not a battlefield, but a city and its crowd. The woman asked the boy why he was acting like that and said that it was Heroes' Square in front of the Vatican. The woman continued, saying that there was a monument there in honor of Esther's group. Hearing the familiar name, Lin turned around and saw a statue in front of him. The monument contained the names and dates of life of all the members of Esther's group. Lin asked the woman what year it was, and she simply asked him what was wrong with him. But Lin didn't calm down and asked again what year it was. Exhaling, the woman replied that it was now 1418, according to the Teresian calendar. Hearing this year, Lin's body became cold, and he began to wonder if he had been reborn, or if his memory had been superimposed on someone else's body. He noticed that the feeling in this body was very strange. The memories of Esther's laughter, Kaze's drunken delirium, and Frida's cigarette smoke were still fresh in his mind. But he realized with fear that all this had happened 300 years ago. With a trembling voice, Lin asked if they had won the last battle, but he immediately thought that it was a pointless question. He thought that if they had not won, they would not have had a monument erected to them, and the sky would not have been so peaceful. With a heavy sigh, the woman asked him why he was saying such obvious things, and then she said that they said that now, if you climb the Vatican Tower, you can see the frozen remains of Lord Lin. Lin didn't ask any further questions but answered tensely that he understood. He wondered what it meant that he had taken over someone's body. The woman continued, saying that Lady Esther had remained by Lord Lin's side until she died. She noticed that it was so beautiful and so sad, and then she asked the boy what he thought. Lin, in response to this, laughed, sweating, and the woman asked him why he was laughing because it was a sad story. Remembering his last moments with Esther, he thought it was amazing that she had kept her promise. Lin walked closer to the monument and reached out his hand to the plaque. As soon as he touched her, he pulled his hand back, thinking that someone had not kept their promise after all. Lin burst into tears and said he had not kept his promise. Lin didn't know what the three of them said about him next, but he became a historical figure. The emperor personally erected a monument to him. Many towers of magicians and families of magicians revered him as a saint. And Reina's mother watched her son with excitement. Lost in his thoughts, Lin thought about how these 300 years had left him with only magic. They left him with memories of travels to many places and the faces of his comrades who smiled brightly at him. Now these adventures could be read about in books. Now these memories have become legends. He recalled that Esther had once said that moments become memories when they are shared with someone. So his memories are not yet memories. Until he dies and meets them, they will remain unshared. These are memories he must live with alone, like an unanswered echo. Noticing movement out of the corner of his eye, Lin turned around and saw a cup of tea. Smiling, Lin accepted the cup from Rain's mother. thinking that his friends were gone now, but they had left him this world. Looking at the cup, he thought about what he should do now. And then he remembered Esther again. Lin's eyes widened, and he thought about what else he had to eat and work with. The Holy Human Empire divided the mage class into 7 levels. Eventually, Lin reached the 5-star level of a mage. Only 2 people in the entire history of the empire had reached the 6-star level, known as a sage. Lin thought that, one could say, they had not reached the end of the truth. But Reina's mother waved her hand at him, getting ready to leave. Seeing the outstretched hand, Lin remembered Esther and thought that if he hadn't left with Esther, he would have reached the 6-star level and then grown old and died. But he would regret it all his life. Even if someone could turn back time, he would leave to travel with her again and again. But now Esther is gone. The girl hoped that this world would be filled with laughter. As Lin followed her mother outside, she thought that this world, which they had all desperately defended together, was truly the way she wanted it to be. He remembered again that those who reached the end of magic would be able to see the true face of the world. So in this life, he must become a 7-star magician. Stopping again at the statue of his friends, he thought that in order to escape from this sadness and emptiness, he would try. He remembered Esther with a wide smile and flushed cheeks, calling him to look at the flower. He remembered Frida saying it was too romantic to show such things to a charmless brat. Kays only watched the flowers from the side. Lin then shouted that he would rather read another magic book than look at this. He asked what was so wonderful about this flower field. Lin thought that the people in Esther's group were all equally eccentric, but he really enjoyed traveling with them. Looking up at the sunset sky, Lin in Rain's body said goodbye to his friends with a smile on his face. He thought that now they were left in the past and could not be together. The living, following the flow of time, must move into the future. Lin had a dream where Esther asked him if he ever regretted not having a family, to which the guy replied that he didn't even know his mother. Lin replied that he didn't even know what it was, so he wasn't interested. He grew up in the slums. If the headmaster of the school, Osiris, hadn't noticed his magical talent and taken him in, he would have lived as an orphan and died on the streets. Frida came up from behind and hugged the guy around the neck, saying that he was a poor thing. Lin pushed her away, screaming that even if he had a family, he wouldn't know how to treat them, so he didn't need a family. Esther smiled at him, telling him it wasn't as difficult as he thought. She told him to just cherish them, but Lin took the advice with a grain of salt. Esther smiled brightly, telling him that he was a good child so everything would work out for him. Lin heard someone call him. He opened his eyes, waking up in Rain's body again. The maid entered the room, bowed, and said that she would prepare breakfast since he was awake. Stretching, Lin walked over to the mirror and looked at his new face. Memories of this spoiled 9-year-old boy's old life returned only 20 days ago. This boy, Rain, is the eldest son of the Ludwig family, one of the 5 great families of magicians. Since Lin himself is an orphan, he had to work hard to adapt to life in a noble family. Lin entered the dining room and was greeted by the maid and Rain's mother. She asked him if he could go and tell his father that breakfast was ready. She said that he would be very glad if he came. Lin smiled, not refusing. A couple of minutes later, he reached his father's office, where he was sitting at the table. Kevin Ludwig noticed his son and asked him if he hadn't had enough sleep. His face had a bad color. Ruffling his son's hair, he noticed that he still looked unwell after the journey. Looking at his father emotionlessly, Lin told him that breakfast was ready. Kevin smiled and removed his hand, saying that this was the only reason he came here. Thanking him, he said that he could go eat first. Lin asked the man if he was not going to have breakfast, to which he looked away at the table. There was a piece of paper with magical seals on the table. Kevin said that the dissertation presentation was next week, so he was in a hurry. The man said that his mind was foggy from eating, so he tried to concentrate and get as much done as he could in the clear morning hours. And looking at the paper, Lin wondered if he was really stuck on this. He asked his father if he wanted him to help him. Kevin asked him if he wanted to support him, to which the boy replied that he wanted to help solve the magic circle. Kevin said that the help was welcome, but his mother would scold him if he was late for breakfast. But Lin didn't listen to him and took the pen. As Lin drew his pen across the paper, he said that magic was the expression of natural laws numerically and then their distortion. He said that the Go rune complicates the equation and conflicts with the hand Cha, so it is better to replace it with the Gu rune. When he finished writing, Lin turned to his father and said that then, using the imperial equation 41:2, he would be able to get the answer immediately. Kevin picked up the paper, asking if such a method was possible. The man thought that this was a difficult problem that even the best scientists could not solve, and yet this was a high-level spell that was 200 years old. Looking up at his son in surprise, Kevin asked him how he had guessed. Digging through Rain's memories, Lin realized that Rain, in terms of his knowledge of basic magic, was a completely ordinary person. However, given that he belonged to a line of mages, this meant that he did not inherit the talent for magic. Lin did not answer his father's question and asked him if he could have breakfast with them now. Smiling, Kevin rushed to hug his son, saying that now they could all eat together. Raina's family was small: mother, father, 6-year-old sister. A little girl, Siri, looked into the room where her brother was sitting. Her hair and eyes were the same as Rain's. She was a sweet girl who inherited the traits of the Ludwig family. Lin turned around, noticing someone's gaze on him. The girl flinched when she realized she had been noticed. Without thinking twice, she ran away. Lin sighed heavily, thinking that such behavior was quite understandable. Because in Rain's memories, he was never kind to Siri. Instead of being cold, he was simply indifferent to everything. Lin didn't think about it anymore and returned to his book. Esther's voice echoed in his head, telling him that he had to take care of them. He couldn't just run away. Lin slammed the book shut, his teeth clenched in frustration, the words about him being a kind child echoing in his head again. Siri, who was standing behind the door, suddenly heard her brother call her, saying that he taught her magic. The girl looked out from behind the doorway uncertainly. Lin asked her if she wanted to play together then, but instead of answering, Siri ran off somewhere again. Lin sighed heavily, thinking that children were too difficult to deal with. But then, after a couple of minutes, the sound of little feet was heard. Siri walked up to her brother and handed him a book called The Basic Formula of One-Star Magic. Surprised, Lin asked her if she was really reading this at 6, and the girl nodded happily. He looked again at the girl, who was now smiling excitedly. Esther's voice came back to him in his head, asking him if he knew the meaning of this flower. In another memory, she happily shouted that she would tell the story of a certain cliff. Lin always complained that Esther treated him like a child, but in reality, he loved these moments more than anything in the world. Siri sat on her brother's lap and began to show what she didn't understand. Lin began to explain to her that a house with a thatched roof and a brick house are different. It all depends on the materials. In magic, this role is played by a magical figure. The shape of a magical figure determines the attribute of magic. For example, if you draw a triangle, it will be the attribute of fire, the shape of a fan, the attribute of wind. Lin continued by saying that the next step is runes. Runes determine the effect of magic, and runes are magic words. Yule means to bind, and Ho means to disperse. For example, if you engrave the Yule rune on a triangular magic square, you will get a spell of binding with the attribute of fire. Lin said that it actually uses mathematical formulas. Siri innocently asked him what mathematical was. The guy looked back tiredly while the girl looked at him with interest, but he continued to explain anyway, deciding that they needed to go over addition and subtraction first. The servants who watched Lin teach Siri said that Master Rain had changed completely, and someone remarked that he didn't care when Mistress Siri cried before. As they entered the room, Raina's mom and Kevin smiled at the sight that met their eyes. The woman said she wanted to capture the sight in a painting, and meanwhile Siri fell asleep, nestled comfortably in the lap of her brother, who was also sleeping. Kevin said the artist might not make it in time, and Siri is too shy, so it might be too much. Looking at the table, the man noticed a book and notes, and realized that his son was teaching his sister magic. He noticed that after returning from the square, Rain seemed like a completely different person, and the woman agreed with him, saying that his tone had suddenly become more mature. She asked worriedly if it was possible that the void had possessed him, to which Kevin replied that it was not like that. He said that he had a similar experience. He said that when he was still a student, he had the honor of meeting Lord Lin. At that time, Kevin bragged that he had become a 3-star magician. But during the war, Lord Lin rose to 5 stars. Living in the peaceful era that the heroes created, Kevin realized how complacent he had been. Perhaps Rain had the same thoughts. After leaving the room, Rain's mother asked if Lord Lin was really frozen in time. Kevin answered that it was true. He had mastered ice magic perfectly, and that he remained the same as he was at 18 years old. The woman asked him to tell her more, to which the man replied that he didn't know anything else. Scratching his chin, Kevin noticed that the ice contained Lady Esther's magic. He said that only Lord Lin and Lady Hester could have induced her. He said he suspected that this letter turned out to be Esther's bequeathed letter to Lin, because one day he would still wake up. Kevin said he thinks their son is a genius. He said that he, moreover, could reach the level of a sage because he had solved the magic square, which he himself had been struggling with for more than a year, and he had only looked at it. The woman exclaimed in amazement and asked the man if that was why he had come to breakfast today. Kevin said that was true. and he thought it might be a bit early, but it was time to teach him their family magic. Rain can become a mage thief who reads and steals any magic. This is only allowed to those who belong to the Ludwig family. This magic is only available to their lineage. The man said he wasn't sure if he could teach him, to which his wife asked if it was that difficult. The man replied that everything was fine. He already had an idea. Under a blue sky, a dazzling field of tulips stretches to the horizon. Sias Tulika. It is a beautiful region famous for its tulips, and a third of its land belongs to the Ludwig family. Rising to a sitting position, Lin said that if you want to develop, you need to set medium-term and long-term goals, especially if it is the path to truth. There is a lot to do to become a 7-star mage. No matter how young you are, there is no time to waste. Lin placed a piece of paper in front of him and said that they needed to call the guide first. Siri appeared behind her brother and asked him what he was doing. The guy muttered that it irritated him so much. Sighing, he nevertheless answered, saying that he was going to call a magic guide. The girl asked again. The guy asked whether he and she should call him. The girl jumped up happily and shouted that she wanted one too. Watching Siri happily spinning around on the grass, Lin thought that she seemed to be enjoying herself. But for a 6-year-old, her speech was a bit clumsy. Could there be something wrong with her? Following this, the guy began to draw on the sheet. Looking at his sister, he said that this was a high-level magic containing 4 different elements, so only a 4-star magician could handle it. There were only 10 of them in the country right now. Lin finished drawing the elements and a bright light shone from the paper. A huge table of light shot into the sky and Sari jumped to her feet, screaming with joy. Suddenly, Lin grabbed his chest. Blood suddenly started flowing from his nose and eyes. He muttered that it was still too much for 4-star magic. He thought that it was good that it was a summoning spell for a guide and not a combat spell. Otherwise, he would have died already. The pillar of light dissolved into thin air. Lin muttered that this body was trash. He began to wipe away his blood with a handkerchief and called Rudian. A blue butterfly appeared and landed on Siri's finger. This butterfly evaluates the user's abilities and determines potential magical power. Lin said that it was Rudian's function to tell her what to study and practice. He said that all the best runes for learning are collected here. It may seem simple, but it is 4-star magic. He asked his sister if she liked it, while she looked at the butterfly with a smile. Siri nodded her head. The girl ran away. Lin told her that now she should go there and study. Suddenly, he felt dizzy and almost fell to the ground. Clutching his head, Lin said that while he was recovering his strength, he would summon the second Rudian later. The second Rudian was summoned. He showed that the physical condition assessment, magical power, is 30-24. Lin thought that this was the level of a beginner mage and began to calculate the magic and stamina. The magic calculation was 77, and the endurance was 64. The guy sighed and thought that he had a long way to go. But then he saw that a bloodline of magic had been discovered that was considered teachable. Lin chuckled and said that this body wasn't complete trash after all. He remembered that when he was traveling with Esther, a young magician came to him. He wanted to prove himself as the best mage of all the mages in the Empire and join the group instead of Lin. However, there was nothing special about his skills. With just one blow, Lin could have completely defeated him. Looking at the defeated guy, Lin became even more convinced that there was nothing special about his skills. However, the guy's eyes, sparkling with a bright light, did not give him peace. Suddenly, the guy stood up and, waving his hand, summoned a huge pillar of light. Lin was able to defend himself and noticed that with those eyes, the guy saw all the magic he used. A fight ensued where this guy only counterattacked. Now Lin realized that this was the power of the Ludwig family's bloodline magic. Bel Sidious. By simply observing the flow of magic, a person can determine what kind of magic the opponent is using, and if their magic skills are equal, the one who uses it better gets the advantage. This Bel Sidious is a legendary eye that only 3 people have opened in the entire history of the Empire. If Bel Sidious is the ability to recognize an opponent's magic, then Bel Curious is the ability to steal it. The reason why the Ludwig family became known as magic thieves is because of this eye. Standing on his feet, Lin thought that the goal of childhood had now been achieved, and he thought that without magical power and endurance, he would not become a great magician. Returning to the house, Lin immediately went to the library where Kevin found him. The man asked him if he was interested in the family's lineage of magic. He asked that it was, of course, a bit early, but would he like to try to learn it? Lin replied that he would like to, thinking that it wouldn't hurt to study the theory beforehand. Kevin replied that then from today, Elin would be his mentor, but only while he was at the academy, and when he returned, he would teach him personally. Lin asked again about Elin, trying to search through Rain's memory to find who she was. Nodding, Kevin said that she was a wonderful person, taught at Deleighton, had great magical talent, and most of all, she was Aunt Elin, who loved her nephew more than anything in the world. He said that they met her when they were 6 years old and someone came into the library. A girl appeared in the library, frowning and looking ahead. She walked up to Lin and looked at him intently, and he just moved away from her. Elin snorted in annoyance and asked if the genius professor Elin Ludwig had come personally to train some unloved child. She grabbed the boy by the head and asked him menacingly if he was ready. The girl asked the boy if he knew who she was, to which he replied that she was Aunt Elin. Turning to the window, the girl exclaimed that he should now address her as Professor Elin, the great genius, and she said that she could not stand slow-witted people who did not understand at first. She glared at him and told him not to ask her any questions after she had taught him once. Thus began Lin's training in the bloodline magic of the Ludwig family. She did not enroll so that it would not be stolen by other mages, so it could only be learned from family members. Elin sighed heavily and said that she would now demonstrate. Then she opened her eyes, which were shining like bright sparks. Looking into her eyes, Lin felt a strange feeling, as if his whole body was being frozen. His eyes widened. He thought with admiration that this was the very same Belle Sidious. He exclaimed in admiration, while Elin closed her eyes and laughed smugly. Then she screamed that in order to use this technique, one had to calculate 3 spells at the same time, something that someone like him couldn't even dream of. Lin exclaimed that he could do it, to which the girl exclaimed that he was too arrogant. Elin, satisfied with the boy's reaction, wrote down several formulas. It was an analysis of magic. Leafing through the notes, Lin noticed that it was more theoretical than he expected. If the founder of the family, Ludwig, had not imposed genetic restrictions, then Lin could have taken advantage of this. Leaning towards her nephew, Alice asked him if it was too difficult for him since he didn't even understand what it meant, to which he replied that he just needed time to understand. Alice had not expected such an answer, and so she hesitated to do the honor of helping. Lin bowed to his aunt and thanked her for guiding him, and he said that he would now figure it out on his own. Alice asked him if he didn't need any guidance, and when there was no response, she told him not to ignore her. Lin sat down at the table and began to read the notes. Alice got angry at being ignored and walked away, saying that he could do whatever he wanted, but it wouldn't work anyway. After a while, she sat down opposite the boy and began to read a book. Lin tried to make sense of the notes and got stuck at one point. Suddenly, Alice snatched the paper from his hands without saying anything. She quickly moved her pencil across the paper, her face expressionless. After a couple of minutes, she placed the sheet on the table in front of the boy. The girl buried her face in her book again while Lin looked at her in shock. After a while, Lin thought again, unable to immediately understand what to do, and the sheet was again torn right out from under the boy's nose. And again, Alice placed the sheet of paper with the written solution in front of him. The girl buried her face in the book again. Lin tried to understand what was happening. He was trying to figure out if this was how modern magical education worked or if she was testing him, while Raina's mother was secretly watching them. After some time, Alice announced a break. She left the room, and from the side, a voice was heard calling Rain. Lin asked her what happened. The woman asked him if he thought Aunt Elin was unusual, to which he replied that she was very unusual. The woman said that Elin is not really honest. She tries to teach him everything, so even if he already knows something, he should ask her questions. She remembered that Elin was the same when she followed her and Kevin around. A few minutes later, Elin returned and sat down at the table, burying her face in a book. Looking up, Lin noticed his aunt sneaking a peek at his notes. When the girl noticed that the boy had noticed her gaze, she immediately turned away. But after some time, when Lin returned to the notes, she began to peek again. Lin thought that Elin was very annoying, even more annoying than 6-year-old Siri. Finally, Lin decided to follow his mother's advice and approached his aunt, saying that she didn't quite understand that part. Elin immediately threw the book aside and screamed that if he didn't even know this, then their family was doomed, and she asked what exactly he didn't understand. Lin pointed his finger at the text on the page, to which Elin immediately told him how he should solve it. Laughing, she said that he should use this formula, and then he would be able to solve it much faster. Lin apologized to her, and she continued, asking him about what he did before he was 9 years old. Lin resigned himself to his fate and continued asking his aunt. Elin's teaching was such that it required a lot of effort, but thanks to her, he significantly reduced the time spent studying theory and gained practical experience. On the 10th day after receiving Elin's instructions, he felt a burning pain in the retina of his eye. He felt all the blood in his body rush to his head, the world slowly turning blood red. And then it happened. The eyes, glowing red, were engraved with the mark of death. All information about everything in the universe comes in the form of formulas. Lin used a fire spell and immediately a fireball appeared on his palm, and on top of it were numbers. Lin thought about what he realized was that in the eyes of the young wizard, all his magic looked like numbers. He said it was really amazing. Elin, stunned, asked the boy if he could really achieve this in just 10 days. Even after specialized training, it took Elin 7 years to master Belcidius. They said it would take 70 years to master Belcurious. Elin thought about how in just 10 days, Rain had gone from a blank slate, knowing nothing, to using multiple spells at once. She thought that he could rival Lin, who was called a master of simultaneous summoning. Looking at him, she thought that he might be a genius. Elin went to Kevin, who muttered that his son had awakened Belcidius in just 10 days. The girl told her brother that thanks to Rain, the Ludwig family can become a leading family of magicians. He is really amazing. Elin walked out of her brother's office, slamming the door. Kevin said that as a father he had nothing more to teach him. After that, Kevin called out to Yud, and a black figure appeared behind the red curtain. The man told Yud to send a message to his father. Yud asked him if he was referring to the former head of the family, to which Kevin asked him if there was any problem with that. The man immediately replied that that was not what he meant. Kevin said to pass on a request to guide his grandson, who has an innate talent, on the right path. Smiling, Yud noted that Kevin had truly gone through fire and water for his son. He said he would do as ordered. Kevin just smirked in response. Thus ended spring and a short summer began. Looking out the window, Lin thought about how this summer seemed to last for about a year. Dark clouds covered the continent, pouring rain day after day. Lin was incredibly busy that summer. During the day, he studied household magic from Elin. At every opportunity, he taught Siri the basics of magic. And at night, he concentrated on training his physical and magical strength. The development of modern magic that Lin learned from Elin and from books was truly astounding. And for Lin, a person living 300 years ago, it was quite shocking. He noted that such complex formulas were simplified to such an extent that the activation time was reduced and the power was greatly increased. The level of magic has increased significantly compared to 300 years ago. But now Lin can lose to a modern 4-star mage. He thought that magic grows with time, and with his current state, becoming a 7-star magician in this era is absolutely impossible. He needs strength and incredible knowledge. At dinner, Lin told his father he had a favor to ask, and Kevin asked again. The boy asked his father to send him to the city of magicians. He said that it would take about 3 years. The parents' eyes immediately popped out of their heads. While chewing bread, Siri asked her brother if he really wanted to go somewhere, to which he said yes. He said that he was thinking of going to the Golden Rose in the city of magicians, where the best magic university, Deleighton, is located. He asked his father if he would let him go. Siri rushed to her brother, screaming for him not to leave. Kevin said that was impossible. He told the boy to think about his age because he was only 10 years old. It was too early to leave home. Kevin said that children from magical families enter Deleighton when they turn 16. Then it is not too late to go to the city of magicians. And he also said that he had already scheduled a very important meeting. Taking a letter out of his vest, Kevin told his son that this letter was sent by his father, his grandfather. Elin, who was sitting at the table and eating a steak, immediately froze with a piece of meat in her mouth. Choking, she coughed silently and asked her brother again, to which he told her to wipe her mouth before speaking. Lin immediately guessed who his grandfather could be. Kevin said that in their family, only 3 people awakened the Belcurious. Lin's thoughts were confirmed, and he thought that this was indeed the Belcurious Scalzi Ludwig motivator. Kevin told his son that his grandfather would personally guide him through Belcurious. Alice rushed to sob into her mother's skirt, and Elin began to wipe her mouth while the man told his son that he should first visit his grandfather. After some time, the carriage reached a huge mansion. Kevin and Lin got out of the carriage and walked down the corridors, Lin looking around. Kevin told his son that he would go and greet his grandfather first. After a while, the man came out of the room and called Rain to meet his grandfather. The man standing by the window turned his red eyes behind him. He raised his hand and pulled out 2 fingers, around which red triangles of the spell glowed. Suddenly, he dropped his hand sharply, which activated the spell. Lin was immediately overcome with an unusual sensation. Everything around shook. The chandeliers on the ceiling swayed. Books began to fall off the shelves. Lin wondered in fear what this old man was thinking. Meanwhile, Scalzi had no intention of retreating. His hand glowed even brighter with the same spell. Lin decided to put his thoughts aside and respond to such a gesture. He raised his hands and they glowed blue. But the next moment, Lin's spell in his hands faded away, as if it had never been there. The man said that it was Belcurious, and Lin involuntarily shuddered at the voice. Looking at the man, he noticed that his eyes were glowing with a bright red light. Scalzi said that this spell can control visible magic at will. After recovering from the shock, Lin smiled weakly, admiring the man. Lin exclaimed in delight, in response to which his grandfather asked him if he wanted to try it too, while Kevin only sighed understandingly. Scalzi's eyes dimmed, and he said that mastering Bel Curious was not enough. In order to use it properly, a master must fully understand it. He asked the boy what level he was at now. Lin replied that he could barely do a speed calculation of a 3rd-star spell, and he himself thought that he could handle spells up to 5 stars, but Scalzi also said that it was almost amazing. He said that, however, Bel Curious requires a huge amount of magical power, so in his current state, he was still far from that. In response to this, Lin asked about it being just a long way, and he asked if it was impossible. Scalzi was caught off guard when the boy screamed at him to take him to this level. Scalzi said his training will be very hard, so he will learn the right way. He said that his first greeting was too rude. He apologized for it and greeted them. Kevin was about to leave when his father called him and said that they could have a drink together after they confirmed Rain's suitability. Kevin, not expecting this, turned to look at his father with wide eyes. Scalzi did not look at his son, but raised his hand to wave to him. Kevin bowed low to his father, saying goodbye and thanking him. After some time, winter came and snow fell in flakes to the ground. At this time, Scalzi and Lin were practicing outside. The man raised his hand to the sky. A bright flash was shining in his palm, and he exclaimed to his grandson that he should be able to use Bel Curious freely. Lin rushed back as his grandfather shouted at him to cast the spell quickly and not screw it up. Scalzi's lightning struck the ground, knocking the boy off his feet, and the man screamed, asking his grandson if he was just going to stand there and watch as the enemy's spell was activated. And Scalzi himself thought with admiration that this boy had an amazing talent. If you teach him one thing, he will comprehend 1,000. He is a genius who masters in one go what would take others a month. All that remains is to master the use of eyes and develop magic. Lin ran around his grandfather as he told him that he had to risk his life in his studies in order to grow significantly. Lin shouted back at him that he understood everything. A bright fireball glowed in Scalzi's hand, and he told his grandson that he would release it now. Looking at his grandson, he told him that if he couldn't dodge, he would die. Lin ground his feet, preparing to meet the spell. Rushing forward, Scalzi gave the boy the signal to take action. Lin screamed loudly as he used Bel Sidious, and his eyes glowed a bright yellow. Meanwhile, the fireball was getting closer and closer to him. Scalzi shouted loudly at his grandson to hurry up. Lin stared at the orb, thinking that he needed to master his opponent's magic with Bel Sidious, and then manipulate it with Bel Curious. The ball came closer and closer, when suddenly a bright red light lit up in the boy's eyes. Everything in his eyes began to move in slow motion. The fireball disintegrated into numbers. The grandfather who stood behind turned into a silhouette, covered in numbers. Lin's eyes widened as he realized that he had been able to activate the Bel Curious, the universe being converted into equations and fed directly into his brain. He thought that now he needed to change the formulas for his provision. He held out his hand to begin changing the spell. Information immediately appeared in his head that the array consists of 2 triangles. The designated runic symbol is Rudihin. The range is 23 kilometer, the size is 17 axles. The solution immediately came to his mind, and a moment later the fireball exploded in a bright flash. After finishing casting the spell, Lin began to fall from exhaustion, but Scalzi managed to catch him. Breathing heavily, Lin asked his grandfather if he could do it. Scalzi responded by joyfully exclaiming that everything had worked out. Now all he had to do was strengthen his magical power. Lin smiled faintly as the man continued, admiring the fact that he was able to awaken Bel Curious at only 14 years old. Scalzi thought that he had barely reached this level at 39. This boy could rewrite the history of the Empire. After some time, when Lin came to his senses, Scalzi said that he would not interfere in his life but wanted to give advice. With a serious face, he told him that when he turned 16 he should definitely enroll into Lighten. Lin didn't answer. He looked away and thought that he was no longer interested. Scalzi told him that if he graduated from the university with the highest level, he would have a chance to meet Archmage Lin. Lin agreed, but said that he was not very interested, and he thought that it was time for them to stop mocking the dead. Scalzi said he felt the same way, but Esther's character left a letter. Isn't he interested in its contents? Lin froze in shock. He couldn't believe that Esther had left him a letter. Scalzi told his grandson that no one had ever awakened Bel Curious at 14 years old. With his abilities, he should be able to read the letter. At that moment, Lin was so stunned that he could only listen blankly. Looking back, he could tell that this was the beginning. It became a story about a journey along the path of former comrades, following Esther's letter. Scalzi walked back into the house and Lynn, coming out of her stupor, ran after him. There was about half a year left before the entrance exams to Delayton, so Lynn decided to take this opportunity to find out what and where to visit when he went south. Kevin asked his son if he planned to stay in the magical city after the exams, to which he replied that he was going to, because all the knowledge was collected there. At the end of the year, the notoriously difficult entrance exam to Delayton takes place, and those who pass it begin their first semester in May. Lynn's attention was drawn to a falling leaf when his mother asked him if he was sure about it, as he was worried about being there without security. Kevin told her that Rain's skills were exceptional and there would be no danger if he followed the known path. Looking up at the sky, Lynn wondered if he would ever be able to call this conversation a memory. On the 13th day of his journey, Lynn found himself in a small town somewhere in the forest. Namely, he found himself in the southern part of the Holy Empire, the Garum region, in a small town where there were many taverns and inns. And what's interesting is that all the people passing by were wearing bamboo hats. When Lynn asked one man why everyone was wearing bamboo hats, the man asked him if he didn't know about Lynn's caravan. The man said that long ago their first leader received help from the archmage Lynn. He said that as a sign of gratitude they wear bamboo hats. The guy's attention was drawn to the staff behind the man's back as he continued talking about how this was a trading group with such a great history. Rolling his eyes, Lynn wondered who this first leader was. Maybe he would remember when he heard his name. Lynn asked the man what such respected chickens were doing in such a small town. The man replied that there was a problem on the road leading to the sunlit highway, and ferocious monsters appeared and dozens of people went missing. So they wait for the Lord's forces to come and destroy them. Monsters are creatures whose essence has been distorted by the abyss. They resemble animals but have a much more grotesque appearance and dangerous magical abilities. And no matter how many of them are destroyed, they never disappear. Lynn walked away, thinking that as long as this monster wasn't a top-tier one, he had nothing to worry about. Night fell and Lynn walked through the bamboo forest. Suddenly he noticed that someone was definitely watching him. However, nothing attacked. Perhaps this creature sensed the difference in magical power, like an animal instinct. Lynn thought idly that he could deal with these monsters, but it wasn't his concern. The monster-slaying team will take care of that. Lynn walked on, memories coming back to life in his head. He remembered Esther pointing somewhere on the map, suggesting a route. An irritated Lynn listened to how they wanted to stop by a flower field on the way. Unable to bear it any longer, he shouted, asking them what they were doing. He reminded them that two groups of warriors who had crossed to the continent before them had been destroyed fighting at the front. Because of this, the front line has stalled and they are barely holding on, waiting for help from others. Frida took a drag on her smoke as Esther said that she understood everything. A legion of red and yellow dragons were heading to the battlefield, and all the strong mercenaries had crossed the sea for honor and glory. Lynn exclaimed that they also needed to hurry, to which Esther responded that that was why she was saying that. Because now that all the strong ones were gone, monsters began to run around the continent as if they had been waiting for this moment. Lynn exclaimed that they were at best a C or B level. They didn't have time to deal with such things. Esther told the boy that there are many people in this world who desperately need help. Even in what seems like a trifle, it makes no difference to ask for help. Covering his face with his hand, Lynn remembered Esther's words about how she hoped he would grow up to help people like him. Lynn muttered that even after 300 years they were still annoying. The boy sat down to rest, a spell glowing in his hand. Lynn muttered the words quietly, activating the spell. Our seal in his hand shone even brighter, ready to act. Lynn lowered his hand and the seal entered the ground and rushed forward to find the monster. The guy remained sitting in the depths of the night forest. Finally, after some time, he heard a loud roar in his head and ordered the seal to bring the monster here. Something flashed like a dark shadow above the bamboo, and something heavy fell in front of Lynn. Looking down, he noticed a white monster that was bound by his spell. Lynn frowned and asked if that was what he was calling a threat when the monster started growling at him. Squeezing his hand so that the spell began to squeeze the monster, breaking bones, the boy told him that he had already killed countless of his relatives. The monster began to writhe in pain as his body was squeezed even more. Lynn told him that he would let him go if he promised not to harm people anymore. All he got in response was a roar, and Lynn said he still didn't understand him. Lynn left behind the monster's body, cut into pieces, and he said it didn't help, it was just out of boredom. The border between the central and southern regions of the empire is the Badantio Ridge, and as soon as Lynn stepped onto it, he was immediately attacked by monsters. Lynn thought with irritation at how the insignificant beast dared to look down on him. But suddenly, Instead of the guy's spell, arrows started flying at the monsters. Turning around, Lin noticed two people standing above. The figure and hairstyle of one of them seemed familiar to Lin, so he inadvertently called out to Kaze. The strangers hurried to jump down. Someone asked Lin if he was okay, and the guy smelled alcohol. A young man, who didn't look like Kaze at all, told Lin that monsters often appeared in this place, and he asked him if no one had warned him on the way here. The second stranger also jumped down, asking why anyone had to warn him, and he said smugly that they, the descendants of the Great Palace, guard it. Lin stood frozen in place, just listening to the strangers and thinking that there was no way it could have been Kaze. Scratching his head, he finally said that he didn't know what school they were from, but they helped him, so he was grateful. And he decided to ask them if this was really the Badantio mountain range. After exchanging glances, the strangers suddenly burst out laughing without answering the guy. A little angry, Lin shouted at them, asking what they were laughing at. The second stranger said that so much time had passed since this ridge became Kislanten, and he still called it Badantio. Kislanten means mountain range of the Palace of Kaze. After defeating the Abyss, Kaze seems to have taken root here. The strangers said that they were students of the archery school founded by Kaze. They also said that traditionally this passage is guarded by him, who was recognized by the school director. Watching the drunk guys, Lin couldn't help but laugh, thinking, is drunk archery really the main subject of this school? What did they do to be assigned here? One of the guys put his arm around Lin's shoulders, telling him that he had come at the right time because today was a festival, a day when everyone could drink free alcohol, and he needed to experience the taste of alcohol if he wanted to become an adult. He continued by saying that alcohol was the path to the sun and the moon, to which his companion wearily remarked that he was such a cultured man. The second guy walked away telling his partner that he can't even think about skipping his shift today talking nonsense. They still have to guard this place. To which the first guy asked how they could let this kid go alone. Grabbing Lin by the scruff of the neck, the boy ran away, shouting to his comrade that he would simply take him to the entrance of the village and return. Walking through the forest, the guy said that the road was hidden because of fallen leaves. Although they tried to clean them up, there were endless amounts of them this year. The guy continued to chat, but Lin was no longer listening to him, looking around. Listening to the boy again, he heard him tell him that if he climbed the wooden stairs from here, he would find the training room. He said that if you follow the path you can get to the village, and at the fork there was a stone that looked like a tombstone. Upon reading the name on the stone, Lin immediately felt his heart break into pieces and his hope disappear. The guy asked Lin why he shouldn't make a wish if he was going somewhere. When Lin asked again, the guy asked him if he really didn't know. And then he said that at the Tomb of Kaze, people usually make a wish, asking for protection. Not believing his ears, Lin told the guy to stop joking, to which the guy asked why he was joking. With a trembling voice, Lin said that it was strange because tombs were not built in the middle of the road, and this Kaze was a hero. The guy asked him if he really didn't know the history of this tomb, if he was from this country at all. He asked him if he knew that among Caius's comrades was the Archmage Lin. He continued by saying that it was a well-known fact so he should know, but Lin was said to be very shy, which gave the real Lin a shock. The guy said that Kaze believed that Lin would return even after death. They said that if the grave had been in the village, Lin might not have come because he was embarrassed, so Kaze asked to be buried here. Lin remembered his moments with Kaze, how he got angry at his snoring and the smell of alcohol. He remembered how, in the middle of their journey, he taught him various symbols. Kaze loved to ruffle Lin's hair, which only made Lin angry and yell at him to stop. But now the guy involuntarily patted himself on the head. Looking at the stone, he wondered if Kaze knew that this farewell was forever. Lin continued to deny it, thinking that he had promised to return. Kaze appeared before his eyes, but when he turned around, his face began to melt, revealing his skull. Suddenly, Lin turned around and ran away. Like a madman, the guy ran through the forest without paying attention to the road until he tripped. He fell to the ground, but was in no hurry to get up, breathing heavily. As the sun began to set again, Lin reached the cliff and sat down on its edge. He told himself that he had to go back to Kaze's grave and say goodbye. Remembering Frida, he thought that even if it was already late, he had to go and tell her that he was back. Remembering Esther, he thought that he should say that he was sorry. He saw Kaze before his eyes and thought that he should go back and ask for forgiveness. The sun set behind the horizon, but Lin still didn't move from his place. He just lay down on the ground. He recalled how Kaze was able to find an eagle in the sky in pitch darkness. All the guys were wondering how Kaze could aim when he was drunk. When Kaze came down from his drunkenness, his hands began to shake so he could not aim. He recalled how Esther had told him that Kaze had no language and therefore could not speak. He remembered how loudly Kaze snored at night, leaving everyone else unable to sleep. Remembering all this, Lin couldn't help but laugh. But then he remembered their last moment together. But the guy kept laughing louder and louder. Soon this laughter turned into loud sobs. Lin raised his hands and covered his face with them. After some time, he rose from the ground and wandered through the forest. He walked towards the village where he again encountered the tombstone. Rustling dry leaves, Lin came closer, a bright red spell shining on his hand. Gritting his teeth, Lin smashed the stone with a sharp movement of his hand. Burnt leaves rose into the air, burning to ashes there. But the stone remained standing in the middle of the road, as if untouched by anything. The sun set again and Lin turned and walked away, making no more attempts to destroy the stone. He mentally apologized to Case, thinking that it wasn't because he was shy, and all because he lacks courage. He lacks the courage to face them, and ask for forgiveness. Without looking back once, Lin walked away, feeling the past recede even further. Autumn in the south was simply amazing. Under such an autumnal summer-autumn sky, a glittering city spread out before Lin. It was the magical city of the Golden Rose, in the center of which the University of Delayton was built. This proud was interesting to Lin from his past life, but he did not live up to his expectations. Everywhere there were shouts from vendors trying to sell books on magic and teaching aids. All sorts of charlatans offered people tools to enhance magic and rare items found in the dungeon. All knowledge passes through the Golden Rose is a phrase that suits the status of this place where everything gathers. Lin sat down next to one of the merchants and asked him how much this item cost. The seller replied that it only cost 10 coins, causing Lin to ask again. Smiling, Lin said that he paid at least 80 coins for it back then. Suddenly, the seller called him, saying that the bell had already rung, which meant the exam would soon begin. Lin hurried to give the money to the seller, almost forgetting why he came to this city. Suddenly, a scream was heard, and a man flew past in front of the guy. People were shouting for someone to catch the thief. The thief ran further through the crowd. Lin thought that the security here was not very good. Turning away, he thought that this was a big city, so the guards should be able to handle it. But then his thoughts were interrupted by the fact that someone crashed into him. Having collided with the guy, the old woman lost her balance and fell to the ground. Lin apologized excitedly and said that he had to go already, he was late. The old woman quietly muttered that it was a family heirloom and that her grandson needed it for the entrance exam. Continuing to mutter, asking for help, the old woman stood up and walked on. Turning away, Lin thought that now was not the time. He had an exam. But suddenly he heard Esther's voice telling him to help her. Coming closer to the old woman, Lin asked her if the man had stolen something from her. Frowning, the guy stopped the old woman, telling her to wait here. After chasing the thief, Lin climbed onto the roof and flew further with the help of a spell. Lin was burning with anger that he still had so much to do, and he was doing this. A bright flash of light flashed in his hand, and he told the thief that now he would turn to ashes. But before he could do anything, a voice was heard from behind and someone's hand touched his shoulder. The girl pushed him away and ran on, shouting at him to move away. She flew down from the roof, and a bright flash shone in her raised hands. Suddenly, the thief slowed down, noticing that sand was starting to rise in front of him. The man looked around in confusion, wondering where the sand came from. Meanwhile, the sand rose higher and higher. The girl shouted loudly to the thief across the street that stealing someone else's property in the Golden Rose was brave, she should give him credit. But he chose the wrong day. The girl stood on her head made of sand, and under her feet were two sand knights holding a sword, and she exclaimed that the thief was finished today. She continued her heroic speech with a smug grin, saying that it would all end for him today, because he had been caught by none other than Kristaten. Lin looked the girl up and down. He noticed her confidence in the sand swirling around her, and he realized she was Warden. The Varden family is located on the eastern edge of the border, like the Ludwig family. It is one of the 5 families of mages. Before Lin regained his memories, they met several times at family gatherings, the girl telling him to put in a little effort to not live like a loser. She pointed her finger at him angrily and shouted that he was a descendant of magicians, even the eldest son. She asked him if he was really not ashamed at all. Lin ignored her every time. Every time they met, she always acted smart, so he called her a nerd. Lin wondered how it was that she was already wearing a uniform since they were the same age. And in the meantime, the thief decided to strike back. Using a wind spell, the thief destroyed the sand tower and the knights, causing Kristaten to fly down. But the wind currents did not stop there. They began to swirl madly along the street, lifting other people into the air. One of the children that were there rose into the air far from its mother, but before it could fly far, it was caught by the tree roots. Using a spell, Lin, who was still on the roof of the house, returned the boy to his mother. Lin raised his head and looked at the thief again, his eyes glowing red, activating Bel Sidious. Looking at the thief, who had strange bracelets on his arm. He thought that this thief was a magician, and he also had quite decent magical power. The guy's gaze involuntarily caught on these strange bracelets, which shimmered golden in the sunlight. Kristaten didn't think of giving up. Frowning, she raised her hands again, activating the spell, and shouted at the thief that he was very good for a thief. She screamed at him to try and block this then, and then she quickly moved her hands with a bright flash shining between them. A little surprised by this outburst, Lin noticed that it was a 2-star magic that she even used mentally. The girl hit her palm against another palm, causing an even brighter flash. The whole city was shaken, and ordinary residents began to look around in confusion. Behind the girl, the ground began to crack. If the Ludwig family is known as magic thieves, then the Varden family is known as magic commanders. Breaking the earth into pieces, something rose from underneath it with a loud crack. A sand golem appeared behind the girl, its eye glowing red, and Lin thought that the Varden family's bloodline magic was earth magic. Kristaten asked the surprised thief if he would try to brag again now, but suddenly the golem's eyes flashed with a different red light. The thief raised his hand with the bracelets from under his cloak and shouted that with this he was invincible. His hand glowed with a dark light, and then something pierced the golem through and through. The golem's eyes went dark, and he was ready to collapse as a heavy mass onto the ground. But after that, the golem's eyes flashed red again, and he didn't care about anything. Noticing this, Kristaten turned to the thief and told him not to even think that he would fall from such an attack, while the golem prepared to attack its mistress. The thief smiled slyly, and the bracelets on his hand once again began to shine with a dark glow. But before the golem could strike, something flew into his hand, smashing it into tiny pieces. Lin appeared in front of Kristaten and said that if he showed his trump card so early, he could get a counterattack. Attacking the golem further, the boy said that just because someone used a spell first, it doesn't mean they've already won. Lin didn't think of retreating. His hand twisted again, but this time with the blue light of the spell. The thief screamed desperately, ordering the golem to kill those children. The golem obeyed the orders of its new owner and decided to strike with its other hand. Lin, in response to this, decided to use a fire spell in a circular shape. Raising his hands to the sky, the boy launched a fountain straight into the golem's face. Kristaten, who, like Lin, was soaking wet, asked the guy if he was a water mage. She said that although the water element is the natural enemy of the earth element, her golem does not fall from a 1-star spell. And to confirm this, the golem rose to its feet again, its eyes glowing with a menacing red light. The thief laughed like a madman and asked how they could boast of such a thing. Kristaten pushed the guy away and rushed forward again. Meanwhile, the golem did not stand still either, and, at the command of its master, rushed forward. Lin once again put his hands forward, using another spell, and the golem was again met by a strong stream of water. Kristaten, who was once again behind the guy, shouted at him that he should already understand that this doesn't work. The man still wouldn't stop and continued to shout at her to stop wasting time and just die. But Lin didn't give up. He continued to use the spell, pressing on the water golem. After a couple of seconds, sounds were heard and cracks began to run across the golem's body. Noticing this, the guy began to spray water even harder at the stone golem. The golem stepped back, and then he noticed that his last hand was beginning to crumble before his eyes. However, she was still intact enough to strike again, which is what the golem decided to do. Lin grabbed Kristaten by the collar and quickly jumped to the side, dragging her behind him. The golem's fist hit the ground with a loud thud, shattering it into pieces. The thief used his bracelets again. Lin thought that he was stealing someone else's magic, but he couldn't use his own. Kristaten, lying on the ground, screamed, asking the guy what he was doing because it was dangerous. But Lin had already jumped to his feet, and a bright flash of a spell shone between his palms. Kristaten noticed that the 1-star spell had only been cast a few seconds ago. Lin began to transform the spell, looking for a solution to this situation. The guy changed the law of the spell. He raised his hands up, and the spell shone even brighter. Lin released the spell from his hands, and it crawled across the ground, breaking it into pieces. From these cracks, plant roots emerged and wrapped around the golem's body. After a couple of minutes, the golem's body was securely tied and pressed to the ground. One of the roots slid across the golem's face, breaking his red eyes. The golem was neutralized. The thief wanted to rush forward, but roots burst out from under the ground again. Approaching the shackled man, Lin tore off his bracelet and asked what it was. Taking a closer look, the guy realized that it was an artifact, and it looked interesting. The thief shouted at him to give it back, to which Lin replied that he had stolen it. The guy thought that stealing control over the enemy's magic was similar to Bel Sidious. There were 2 magic circles engraved on the stone, which meant that he could steal up to 2-star magic. In a panic, the thief asked the boy who he was and how he was able to cast magic so quickly. But Lin didn't answer him and just turned around, walking away and thinking that even if he told him, he wouldn't believe him. Approaching the old woman, Lin returned the artifact to her, telling her to pass this thing on. The old woman took the artifact back with tears in her eyes, and the crowd erupted in joyful shouts. People began to shout compliments to Lin and Lady Varden. Hearing about Lady Varden, Lin immediately remembered the exam and froze. Without paying attention to anything else, the boy broke loose and ran away. An unknown person in a cloak approached the chained thief and put a sword to his throat. Then this unknown person in a cloak approached Krista, who was still sitting on the ground. Krista recognized the stranger as Professor Caroline, who told her that she had made a mistake today. The woman said that it was great to be confident, but she shouldn't have used the golem so hastily. Getting up from the ground, the girl replied that she knew and would be more careful next time. And then she happily asked the professor if she had seen that boy, and noticed that his magic casting speed was almost the same as the professor's. The woman replied that he might even be faster than her. But then Krista said that the guy didn't seem that strong during the selection. Professor Caroline asked why the guy was here if he had come for the exam. Krista asked her what she was talking about, to which she replied that the exam had already started. Krista sullenly asked the professor if there was any other way she could not accept it. She asked if she could be given some slack if she was late because she was helping someone. The woman asked her since when she thought so much about others. In response, the girl exclaimed that a person like that guy should exist to make things more interesting. And she asked with a grin whether it wouldn't be better for the school to have interesting characters. Professor Caroline made no reply to this, but soon agreed. Back in her office, Caroline looked over Rain's file, which stated that he had no experience in magical competitions and no significant achievements in other areas. Perhaps he is a genius prodigy who can become the White One sent to the Ludwig family from heaven. But then the woman noticed that this guy had been Scalzi Ludwig's assistant for 3 years. She was a little surprised by this, because he was a former great magician and the head of Osiris. It didn't matter to him if someone was his relative. Everything depended on talent and strength. He ruthlessly rejected those who failed to produce results. Professor Caroline wondered if he was just an assistant. Then why was he called a prodigy by the 8 great schools? Thinking about this, the woman smiled to herself. Professor Caroline asked her assistant to make an appointment with the rector because she needed to discuss something regarding a private appointment. The sun was shining brightly into the rector's office, and she said that it seemed like history was repeating itself. They told her that it was impossible to say for sure, but it seemed that talents always appeared at the same time. Examples of this could be Hubert from the Rackland School, Lillian from the Rivendell School, Kaiden from the Haramun School, Nora from the Melev School, Logan from the Chehak School. 5 latecomers from 8 major schools were admitted immediately. The Varden family also sent a talented child, but he may have problems. The principal told Caroline that since the conflict between the magical families and the 8 schools was so deep, it was not very pleasant to get involved in the students' disputes, but it was certainly a special situation. DeLayton's principal, Madelia Page, said she would need to notify teachers and professors. She told Caroline to watch the students closely and intervene if necessary, but not too often. Caroline didn't answer the rector, so she asked what had happened. The woman responded that she thought it was too early. She asked if it was too early to make such a decision. The rector asked her to tell her more, and then Caroline said that she thought there was another genius in this generation besides Krista. Madelia asked if there were any new students she didn't know about yet, to which she received a negative answer. She then asked if this was the child she wanted to give an extra test to which Caroline replied that she wouldn't believe her even if she told her. She could very well have seen him at the family meeting. Madelia told her that she still had a bad habit of slapping her hands. Caroline replied that it was just her personal opinion, but maybe they could give Ryan Ludwig the opportunity to do so and not interfere at all. Madelia thought about this, and the professor continued saying that she was interested in how he would behave in this situation. The rector replied that they would have the results soon, to which Caroline agreed, saying that Owen was there after all. The rector asked whether he really said that he would not accept any award, to which she received the answer that he absolutely does not like it when it turns out that he is a hero. It brings him problems. Caroline said that he preferred to read his books in peace, to which the rector replied that he was strange. The professor grinned and replied that strange people make good magicians, as her teacher always said. But then she noticed that Madelia seemed a bit gloomy today. After a short silence, the woman replied to the other that she was still as insightful. She said that if Rain Ludwig caught that thief, then it seems to be connected to the Dark Church. Caroline said she didn't think so, but Madelia asked her if she remembered ever saying anything stupid, and then said that special cases had contacted them first. With a serious face, she told Caroline that she had a bad feeling about this, so she needed to be prepared. The next morning after the chaos, Lin was informed that he had been accepted, even after he missed the exam due to being late. Professor Caroline suggested that he pretend that he had passed the additional exam and was included in the list of successful candidates. She was worried that the extra exams would be seen as a disgrace for those who failed the regular exam. But that wasn't a problem for Lin. Fearing that he would have to retake the exam, the guy accepted the offer, and now he stood before the gates of the greatest magical university of Delayton U, where the pinnacles of the Sacred Empire's intellect had gathered. Looking around without much enthusiasm, Lin reflected on how he had never been involved with school. In his past life, he studied magic under the headmaster of the Osiria school, and in this life, all his education was given to him by his new family. Even now, he didn't feel the need to learn from anyone. But in this life, he needs to find what Esther left behind. She is waiting for him at the end of this path. Smiling to himself, he thought that until then he should improve his magical skills at least to the level of his previous life. Suddenly, a girl's scream was heard behind him. It turned out to be Krista. The girl immediately recognized Rain. He greeted her, and she shyly responded to the greeting. Krista wanted to thank the guy for helping her, but soon she screamed that she could have done it herself. The girl's scream caused other students to turn around, recognizing the girl as Krista Varden, who was the most popular of her generation. Lin noted that she was even more popular than he thought, to which she sheepishly replied that there was even a saying, "Anyone in our generation who doesn't know Krista Varden is a spy for the Republic." Krista waved her hand, telling Lin that he could be happy because he was an opponent she had acknowledged. Lin scratched his head in annoyance, thinking about how he couldn't stand annoying creatures. And he remembered that there was someone like that in the past. Just like now, in the past, that girl as the number 2 candidate for the post of the next dean, he decided to consider Lin as a rival. The brat Lin met in the tower insisted on being treated like a senior since she entered the tower first. Lin remembered well how boastful she was. Lin chuckled as he looked at Krista, and she asked him why he was laughing at her. She brought her hand back and began to cast a spell, screaming that if he thought what he saw then was all she could do, he would soon regret it. With a wave of her hand, the girl summoned a sandstorm that filled the entire corridor. Lin couldn't understand why she was acting like that in a place like this. Krista asked the guy with a grin whether he had already understood what her true abilities were, whether he felt that he wanted to give it his all. The guy thought that this girl didn't care about her surroundings. He thought with irritation that she looked like Giselle. Maybe she was her reincarnation, and he decided to put her in her place. But suddenly someone's mocking voice was heard, which said that this was such a dramatic performance. Looking at the girl, he reproachfully noted that on the one hand, she was the best newcomer, and looking at Lin, he noticed that on the other side was a genius prodigy who had barely passed the additional exam. Coming closer, he said it was like comparing extremes. Krista immediately recognized the guy and named him Hubert. There were rumors in the crowd that this Hubert was from Rohwinham School. He was a graduate of Delayton High School, and he had also been a rival of Krista for a long time. Krista called off the storm, to which Hubert encouraged her to continue as it was great fun, to which the girl responded that the quality of the audience was too low, so it wasn't fun. She smirked and said that it would also be a shame if he got caught in her magic and flew away somewhere, so he should be grateful to her for her attention. Hubert laughed and said that it brought tears to his eyes, and he asked if it wasn't too shameless to open his mouth, when even she couldn't handle it herself. He said that she should know her place or she would regret it. Frowning, Krista said that a finalist shouldn't talk like that, and she asked him why he didn't show what he could do. Hubert noticed that her proud nature had not changed, and he said that she would disgrace her family if she continued to live like that. Hubert's attention turned to Rain, and he said that he was so insignificant that he didn't even notice he was there. Bowing to the boy, Hubert asked him what he, the brilliant young master, was staring at, whether there was something on his face or whether there was something in his words that bothered him. Lin tilted his head in boredom and replied that it wasn't so much that he was bothered by it all, but rather that he had a question. Who is this man acting so self-confident? He asked him if he knew how to use magic at all because he had to be able to handle it well in order to fight him. Everyone present was shocked by such a statement and froze in shock. Hubert's eyes widened as he asked the boy what he had just said. Krista couldn't help but laugh out loud. She exclaimed that he was trampled while bragging to the newbie. Hubert glared at her as she continued, saying that if she were in his place, she would be too embarrassed to even show her face. The teacher's voice was heard asking what they were doing there and then telling them to hurry up and come in. The teacher told Krista, as the freshman representative, to come in and get ready for the oath. Lin turned away from Hubert and headed into the hall under his gaze. Krista was dragged into the hall, but at the end she called out to Rain. She exclaimed that she would leave everything as it was for now because there was no time, but next time he might not even think about it. They would settle everything properly. The other students looked at Rain and wondered what this meant, since they couldn't even be compared. Someone told them that Krista would actually have a hard time. The student asked him what he meant, to which he replied that the young gentleman was the assistant of Director Scalzi. Soon everyone would see how strong he was. All the first years gathered in the hall, and the 1338th Delayton entrance ceremony began. Krista, as the freshman representative, gave her speech. Lynn listened to all this with boredom, thinking that it would all end as soon as possible. But then, the rector's welcoming speech to the first-year students was announced, and Lynn perked up a little. Madelia walked onto the stage as the host announced her as the best mage in the entire empire. The crowd began to whisper animatedly among themselves. Lynn thought about how she was the greatest mage in the empire, the current head of the Council of Mages, and a direct descendant of the founder of magic, Imitsa Page. When Madelia showed everyone, the guy noticed something in her appearance. As it turned out, he noticed her purple hair, which was a result of genetics. A microphone flew up to Madelia, and she greeted all the freshmen at Delayth and introduced herself again. She congratulated the 233 freshmen gathered there on their admission, but said that half of them would not survive until their second year, either being held back or expelled. The entire hall froze in silence as it listened to the rector's speech. With her hands spread, Madelia continued, saying that of the 117 survivors, about 60 would go on to third year, and only half would graduate, leaving less than 30 graduates each year. The rector said that Delayton was such a place where talents were honed. They would be constantly tested under the guise of polishing to determine if they were raw gems. Delayton's policy is unlimited competition. Those who resign in the competition will not even have the right to receive a diploma. She said they would feel it acutely throughout their stay here. Finishing her speech, she exclaimed that they should sharpen themselves. Hubert smirked and Madelia continued, telling them to fight each other and evolve. After all, Delayton only works like this, until the insignificant cameras shine with their own brilliance. Madelia told them that she would be happy to meet them again in 3 years. She said that after these 3 years, she will greet them as a fellow magician. Smiling, she said that only then would she wish them luck. After a while, the crowd began to clap hesitantly. Then the audience burst into joyful shouts and Madelia walked off the stage. The students stood up from their seats, clapping their hands loudly, and Lynn thought about how much he was looking forward to this day. Meanwhile, the professor stood on the balcony and watched the new students. Caroline said they were chaotic, but she liked the energy, to which they countered that energy should match ability. The woman asked Professor Owen what he thought. Tall replied that he expected this party to be of a high level, but so far he sees only idiots with manure in their heads. He said menacingly that they were all doomed to failure. The next day, Lynn went to the faculty building, the Hall of the Sleeping Dragon. He noticed that the building was truly majestic. Lynn found his office and went in. There were no people there yet. The guy sat down at a desk by the window and began to sort through his notes. A voice came from the side, saying that they were now classmates, so they should take care of each other. Lynn turned his head with a smile. He froze when he noticed Krista sitting down next to him. The guy covered his face with his hand, and the sky immediately darkened. Krista smugly said that he had the honor of sitting and competing with her, the best student, from the very beginning. A little girl with pink hair appeared from behind Krista and said that this meant she was very happy to sit with him. Krista laughed and said that she was really happy because she would be turning up this guy's arrogant nose from the very beginning. Hubert walked by and said ironically that it was so delightful. He said that the daughter of the Panton family was also watching this performance, and he was very sorry that the lady was behaving rudely, pointing her finger at others. The girl replied that he did not understand. This is actually often Krista's charm. Gertrude Panton grinned and said that even without that she was quite charming, at least more so than someone who was only impressive in appearance. Krista, Gertrude, and Hubert began to exchange barbed remarks which made Lynn's stomach ache. He remembered how Frida had once asked him if he had ever wanted to go to school, to which he had replied no, and the woman had said that was strange. Lynn told her that he was already an elite magician. There was nothing left to teach him at school, to which Frida replied that he was an idiot. And she said that school is not a place to study for academic success, so Lynn asked her, what is the purpose of studying then? Frida replied that there you learn to communicate with people. Looking at the trio, Lynn wondered if Frida was right, and school was the place where they would learn about people like these. The hands on the clock moved closer to the start time of the lesson, and Professor Owen entered the classroom. He walked behind the lectern. Lynn wondered if it was a gorilla, but immediately realized it was the curator. An excited hubbub began again among the students. Noticing the tension, the guy asked Krista who the man was, and the girl told him that he was a professor known for being stingy with grades. Owen looked at all the students with an appraising glance. She noticed that many were yawning, talking among themselves, and in general were not in the mood to study. Covering his face with his hand, Owen made a displeased face. He muttered that he had no motivation at all when he thought about spending a whole year with these pathetic monkeys. Taking a piece of chalk in his hands, he said that they only have manure instead of brains. After asking someone where he was looking while he was talking, he snapped his fingers and sent the chalk flying. The chalk immediately flew into the chin of one of the students, forcibly knocking his head back. Noticing that the students were laughing, Owen raised his voice and said that they didn't know anything. They think that the whole world belongs to her. Since they have come to Delayton, they dream of becoming a court magician of some noble nobleman or living in clover, having built their own tower of magicians. They should cast aside their illusions if they ever become like that. They can call him master, but for now they are just monkeys, barely growing fur, and they still have a whole mountain of things to learn. He asked them if there was anyone from the 8 major schools there, and several students, including Hubert, raised their hands. Owen sighed and said that the worst thing here was them, the idiots from the 8 main schools. He said that the strange mathematical formulas they used in the name of school traditions were simply astounding, so he didn't even expect any contribution from them. They just needed to be left alone. He then asked if there were any noble families of mages, and Krista and Lynn reluctantly raised their hands. Owen told them they were just disgusting. He said that it was all because they were acting all know-it-all and arrogant, and without experiencing any difficulties, he told them to go home and learn to change their clothes on their own first. Lynn thought grimly that their professor was a great ape with an unparalleled talent for rhetoric, perhaps even more suited to the role of a cult leader than a magician. The man said that his task this year was to make them at least useful magicians, even better than monkeys. He sternly said that there was no place for anyone worse than a monkey here. Anyone who couldn't cope would be thrown out, so they should at least try to evolve. There was a deathly silence in the audience. Owen asked them why they weren't answering. Were they not paying attention? Approaching one of the students, he asked him whether he should teach him to answer. Owen asked if he was scary, to which the student quickly replied that he was not scary. Then Owen asked him if he was easygoing. The man announced that they were going to have a test now. He told the students to form teams of 2 with those sitting next to them. Owen said the last team would be eliminated. The students began to talk quietly, not expecting that they would be expelled so easily. Some began to suggest that this was all just to scare them. Owen walked up to the board and began writing the test assignment on it. A few minutes later, a task in the form of a spell appeared on the board. The man said that they were given 20 minutes for everything. From that moment on, they had to solve the problem on the sheets of paper that were in front of them. Those who cannot solve it within this time and those who pass it last will be excluded. A tense silence fell over the audience again. Owen shouted that the exam had already started. The guys actively got to work. Owen exclaimed that even monkeys could handle 2-star spells if they tried. Lynn glanced at Krista, who began to search for a solution, muttering under her breath. The girl told the guy to help her and make the basic formula using matrices, and then find the answer using the cubic function. Hearing about the matrices, Lynn asked her if she was the one who suffered unnecessarily. In response, Krista screamed that he stopped talking and started doing something. Krista's mind was filled with memories of everyone saying that the Varden family was already finished. And all because the eldest and youngest daughters were so disorganized. Krista was given the responsibility, believing that she would definitely be able to restore their family. Krista stubbornly scribbled her pen on the paper, muttering under her breath that she had to become the best at everything. Lynn looked at the girl and thought about the heavy burden she had to bear. Krista asked him irritably why he was looking at her like that. Had he already found the answer from the function? Lynn handed them a piece of paper with the function written on it, and Krista happily said that all that was left was to decide. But suddenly a strong wind blew, and the girl irritably asked why this was happening right now. Lynn extended his hand, using a spell to stop the interfering wind, and then all the sheets of paper with the solution were torn to shreds. Krista jumped up and screamed in panic. Owen told her to be quiet, and he asked if they couldn't do anything without making noise. After apologizing, Krista sat back down and said in a weak voice that she would have to start all over again. Lynn, noticing something was wrong, activated Bell Sidious. Near the torn sheets, he noticed a stream of magic. Following this stream, Lynn noticed that it was coming from one person, who turned out to be Hubert. The boy thought that the 8 main schools were just playing childish pranks. The Rohirrim school is the school of wind. Their secret art has no sound or color, meaning the magic used is wind manipulation. Lynn was pulled out of his thoughts by Krista's scream. telling him to give her his paper. She told him to rewrite it quickly. Unable to bear it any longer, the girl quickly took the piece of paper from him, asking him what he was doing. She began to write nervously, thinking that there were 8 minutes left, and she already had the solution process in her head. But then Lin snatched the paper from her hand. Before the girl could ask anything, the guy told her that they wouldn't be able to finish on time using this method. Krista asked him how he could know if he hadn't tried it, to which he replied that she wouldn't understand anyway. The girl looked at the guy with irritation, almost cursing. Lin told her that the task was doable. It was just that the solution was too difficult for her. And right after that, the guy started to quickly write another solution. After some time, the solution was already completed. Lin told Krista that she couldn't be a mage if she burned out so easily. He told her to remember that a strong magician must remain calm at all times. And he himself remembered that in the world where he lived, even 8 minutes was not enough. We had to fight fiercely with the enemies, winning every second. The price for a few seconds of delay was not just exclusion, but death. He thought sadly of all the lost people who had died because of his delay. Lin told Krista that this time he would take the lead, and that she just needed to help. He told her not to delay them. Hubert and his partner had already finished the entire task and got up from their desks and went to the professor. Hubert handed Owen the solution sheet and asked him to evaluate it. Owen took the paper and placed it on the table. He raised his hand over it, which glowed with a bright blue light. The spell on the piece of paper activated and it rose into the air, releasing steam. Owen, with the same stone face, noted that all the runes were working fine. Considering that she had done it before everyone else, that was not bad. Hubert smiled and his partner relaxed. But then the man told them not to be so confident because it was not good. Sitting down at his desk, Owen told them that the problem would only take 2 minutes to solve, and so he gave them only a C. Bowing slightly, Hubert said that he couldn't accept it. He said that he had solved it first and his formula was perfect, so why such a low score? He asked what the reason was, to which Owen sternly told him to stop fooling around. Looking at the boy with a piercing gaze, the man told him that he knew better why he had a C. Hubert's partner asked the professor what it meant, and Lin appeared behind her. Lin asked the girl to step aside. Other students began to whisper that their answer sheets had also been torn up earlier. The students were surprised that they had already finished. Hubert looked at them in amazement. Lin handed the paper with the solution to the professor and asked him to evaluate it too. Smiling slightly, Owen exclaimed that they were already finished, and he was delighted to expel these newcomers from the magical family. Lin said that if someone can't use magic just because the wind blows, they can't call themselves a mage, and Krista handed over a piece of paper. Snatching the paper from the girl's hands, Owen told the boy that he liked his spirit, but it couldn't compare even to his mother's wart. Looking at the solution, the processor noticed that the magic circle was different from what he had proposed. Lin said that one magic circle is shaped like a fan and the other is drawn as a circle. The professor asked him why he changed it, to which the guy answered him that the rune J works well with water attribute magic. Based on this, he simplified the formula for this rune to work. Lin said that if the rune requirement could be solved with a first-order equation, the activation time would be accelerated, to which the professor remarked that I was reminded of this in high school classes, and he knew it very well. Lin and Owen continued to talk about it, which was starting to give Krista a headache. Lin said that one cannot say that one is using magic correctly until one has fully mastered the runes, so with that in mind, he changed the shape of the magic circle. Owen thought about how he was trying to shorten the activation time based on his understanding of the runes, and he said that was a smart answer, but whether it would activate properly was another story. Lin didn't deny it, but simply nodded. He grinned and suggested that the professor check it out for himself. Owen raised his hand over the solution using magic and exclaimed that he couldn't wait to see it fail. Krista tensed up, and the professor continued, saying that if he made a magic circle with a double attribute, the math to solve it would become several times more difficult. The paper began to glow with bright colors, and the man said that they would see if it was skill or just a trick. To Owen's surprise, the spell began to work and the flash of light became even brighter. Streams of wind began to spread from the leaf, rushing towards the ceiling. Streams of wind gathered above the heads of those present and came together in a bright flash of light. In this flash of light, a bright star lit up, indicating that the spell had definitely worked. Noticing this, Owen suddenly clapped them lightly. He said he had been teaching for 13 years, and he had seen many geniuses. He said with a smile that, however, they were the first to give such an answer. The students looked at the other students below in amazement. Owen said that it certainly pissed him off, but he had no other choice. He said that this answer deserved an S grade, which he had never given to such a trivial quiz before. Krista started shaking with happiness, and Lin said with a smile that this was high praise. Smiling broadly, Kostra thanked him loudly. Raising her hands to the sky, she began to jump for joy. After a couple of minutes of such joy, Owen came up to her and said that they could go back to their seats if they didn't want him to lower their grade. Turning to Hubert and his partner, he told them that they could leave too. The assessment was over. Krista walked past Hubert with a triumphant look. Lin stopped in front of Hubert and stared at him, causing the latter to flinch. Lin's eyes darkened with irritation, and Hubert asked him with a smirk if he had anything to say. Taking up his book again, Owen told them not to make him repeat it unless they wanted to get discipline. Walking past Hubert, Lin told the boy with a menacing voice that next time everything would be different. Some students were able to pass the symbol test, however. And then she endured her first lesson, listening to the harsh criticism of Owen's processor. Lin turned to Krista, pointing out a part of the work. However, the girl did not answer him in any way. Then the guy asked her if she was listening to him at all. The guy raised an eyebrow in surprise, not understanding why she was acting like this. The bell rang, and Professor Owen told the students that this was the end of the level. The students breathed a sigh of relief, noticing the expressions on the students' faces. Owen asked them what was wrong with them. Was it really too hard? He told them not to worry, because next time he would show them something even more difficult. Those who failed would be left behind. So they should drill today's lesson into their heads as if their lives depended on it. Standing up from her desk, Krista turned her back to Lin and addressed Rain. Lin asked her what she wanted to tell him. Still not looking at the guy, the girl quietly thanked him for helping her with the test. The guy told her that her voice was too quiet and he asked her to repeat it. With a red face, Krista turned around and told him not to make fun of her. She shouted that next time she would definitely return the favor, so he shouldn't be impudent. They were still rivals. Continuing to scream, she told him that they had helped each other only this once. The other students discussed Krista and Rain, still shocked that they had received the highest grade. Someone said that it was quite logical that Krista received such a rating, to which the other said that they were in pairs. Krista and that genius were on the same team. The next day, Krista and Lin got to the dorm. The guy asked her to return the favor and asked her what floor the dorm was on, to which she answered that it was on the highest floor of the freshmen. And she asked him if he had forgotten that he was the best in the class, but then told him not to show off. Lin told her that she started it herself. He asked her about whether promises that she cannot fulfill do not seem frivolous to her. Krista walked away in irritation, shouting at the end that she was looking forward to this. Lin entered the dorm when everyone around him started talking about him. Someone recognized him as the son of the Ludwig family, but another immediately stopped his thoughts by saying that he would not get a room next to Krista. The first one answered him that with such skills he would have passed the regular exam, so why take the additional one? Lin, however, made it to his dorm room. Taking out a small piece on a chain, the guy brought it to the door. The pendant lit up and the door began to open. There were bookshelves on either side of the entrance, and Lin noticed that this was a solitary room. In the corner of the room, by the window, there was a table and a chair. Walking up to the table and running his hand over it, Lin said that it reminded him of his time in the Magic Tower. He smiled as he thought about how even in his past life, he had sat in a room like this, focusing only on studying magic. And he immediately remembered his room in the tower, where Esther came for the first time. Lin shook his head, trying to clear the memory. Approaching the bed, the guy fell onto it with all his might. He thought that there was nothing else here except the first lesson, and he wondered if he should instead infiltrate the Vatican and explore its remains. He thought that it would be too difficult to get in there with such a personality and abilities. He raised his hand, on which the spell began to gather. 3 red triangles flashed in the air above the boy's hand. Following this, they began to cross paths with each other. But the very next moment, the spell burst like a soap bubble. Lin frowned and thought that even 4-star magic was still too much for him. Suddenly, the guy noticed someone sitting on the window frame of his window. As it turned out, it was an owl, with a rope tied to its paw in a bag. Lin got out of bed and stroked the owl's feathers, taking the bag and taking out a box. The owl flew away, and Lin noticed that the box had the date 1388 written on it. When the boy opened the box, he noticed that there was no sender on the box, and he assumed that his father might have sent it to him. Inside the box were several books with no inscriptions on the covers. Lin carefully took out both books, examining them carefully. One of these books was pretty worn out. The guy looked at it more carefully and his attention was drawn to the inscription. He immediately recognized in this book the diary which he had entrusted to Esther at that very last moment. Lin froze in shock and immediately wondered who could have sent him this. In a panic, the boy looked out the window in an attempt to see the owl or the sender. Looking around the street, he wondered if anyone knew his true identity. The next day, Lin and the other students went to the campus's magical training facility, the Battle Dragon Field. The students watched someone fight while a countdown sounded that there were 30 seconds left to the goal. As it turned out, it was Krista, who fought various monsters alone. Gertrude noticed that there were only 15 seconds left, and she asked the girl if something good had happened. Continuing to fight, Krista asked her why she thought so. Gertrude continued counting and said that she felt more excited than usual. Counting down 5 seconds, she asked her if it was all because she met Lord Rain. Gertrude said she wondered what happened between them. While furiously killing another monster, Krista screamed that nothing happened. She was just annoyed that she would see his annoying face again today. Krista continued to make excuses, and Gertrude remained silent, thinking that she would not deceive anyone with her behavior. She thought that it seemed like the rumors about Rain Ludwig helping her during the exam were true. The girl thought that it was surprising because he was not like this at the family meeting. By that time, Krista's training was over. Hubert walked down the central hall of the student dormitory. Suddenly, someone called out to him, calling him a loser with a C grade. Hubert told this guy, whose name was Logan, not to mess with him. Otherwise, if he continued like this, he might die. Logan, a graduate student at Chakek School, told the guy to calm down. He just heard someone get a C and nearly died laughing. The guy continued by saying that besides, Krista got an S rating even with sandbags. He asked Hubert if that genius wasn't in his group, and he wondered what he really was, whether he was just a coward like the rumors said or not. And he noted that he was still better than him. Hubert simply told him it was none of his business, calling him a muscular fool. Turning around with his eyes blazing with anger, he asked the boy if he wanted to challenge him. Logan's eyes also flashed dangerously, and he said that he could and wanted to. The room began to shake slightly, under the pressure of the two mages' forces. The noise was cut through by a quiet female voice asking them to stop. The girl indifferently insisted that it wasn't just the two of them here. Logan told Rivendell graduate student Lillian that it was just a joke. The guy said he was thinking of a strategy to take down Krista and that genius, and he asked the girl if she wanted to join. Without looking up from her book, the girl replied that this was the reason why his magical achievements were not growing. He was always up to senseless pranks. She said that even this was Krista. There was no benefit in bullying the weak. Hubert just turned around and said that he would destroy them himself. As he walked away, he told Logan that if he touched them by accident, he would be the first to go down. Hubert reached his dorm room and cursed quietly at Logan. Taking a deep breath, the guy suddenly hit the wall with his fist. Gritting his teeth, he could not believe that this Rain worked under Professor Scalzi as an assistant, chosen not by blood ties, but by skill. While Hubert was thinking about how Rain couldn't even get a rank, he was sitting in his room reading one of the books from the package. Leafing through the book, he summed up that the first part tells about Lin's life. The second tells about the magic and fighting styles that he used. The guy slammed the book shut and sighed, thinking that this was incomprehensible. He wondered if anyone knew his identity, and even if they did, why they hadn't gotten in touch. Looking at his watch, Lin began to get out of bed to turn off the light before the duty officer arrived. As he approached the switch, his gaze caught on his diary. Thinking of Esther again, Lin couldn't help but pick up the diary. He leafed through it, and suddenly a blue butterfly flew out of the diary. Noticing this, the guy immediately threw the book aside and jumped back. Looking closer, he noticed that it was Rudian, whom he had created in his past life. He frowned as he thought about how this one was twice as big and much darker than before. He thought that even if it was him, how could he have survived for 300 years with whose magical power he managed to do this, and most importantly, for what purpose? The memory of his friends flashed before Lin's eyes again, and Rudian sat on his finger before the boy could react. Rudian informed Lin that his progress in researching the unique magic could be continued, with progress at 37%. And then a whole wall of text flew out of Rudian. After briefly glancing at the text, Lin immediately realized that this was all the things he had researched in his past life to reach the level of a sage. He immediately noticed that all 12 original runes that he had tested in real battles 300 years ago were there. He thought they had all failed, but they made up 37%. He immediately thought that there was no way that a 4-star magician like Rudian would be checking the progress of a 6-star magician. But then he smiled and thought that if this was all true, it meant that he had not made a mistake in his path. The butterfly flew from his hands, and he thought happily that if he continued in the same spirit, he would definitely be able to reach the truth. Lin sat down on the bed, completely oblivious to everything around him, and began to read his research. This sudden hope made him completely forget about the sender of the books. This information disappeared from his head in the blink of an eye. The next day, Lin got up and started getting dressed. Having dressed, He went to the door intending to continue his research again after 300 years. On the way to his destination, he was reading one of the books sent and noticed that it was raining. He noted that unlike the north, where it gets cool during rain, the southern regions remain warm even during rain due to the influence of the Badantio mountain range. The guy went out into the rain and, humming a song, walked on. Lin reached the place and asked about where he could freely practice magic. The girl at the answering machine said that Battlefield was perfect for him, and she asked him why he was wet. According to the head of the dormitory, Battlefield is a place to train powerful magic with a wide range, surrounded by high-level fire magic to prevent and restore damage. Grievances can mindlessly cast spells without caring about the surrounding environment. The headman pointed to the ring and told the boy to use it to enter. Lin followed her instructions and used the ring, and the walls of fire immediately parted to the sides. A voice came out greeting the student Rein Ludwig and informed him that there were currently 30 rooms available. The headman told him to feel free to use them all. Lin walked inside and took the farthest room, room 15. He told the system to give him a stronger target, and half the room lit up with bright light. A green one-eyed monster immediately appeared from the circle of light on the floor. Looking at the monster, Lin noticed that it was at the level of 2-star magic. The boy opened his book, choosing a spell he wanted to try. Closing the book, he decided to start with the rune U, which gives molecules the property of wriggling, thanks to which the flame, if engraved on fire magic, can burn for a long time. Lin decided to get down to business, and a triangular magic circle began to glow above his hand. On this magic circle, he found the rune U. However, the spell did not work, but simply dissolved into thin air. Frowning and putting all his strength into it, the boy noticed that the magic of 1 star was not suitable for this spell. He put his hand forward and 2 magical triangular circles began to shine in front of him. Vigorously waving his other hand, Lin began to engrave the rune again. Triangles with runes quickly rotated in the air. Slamming his fist into his palm, Lin caused the spell to explode. But it didn't end there. The fire turned into small flames that surrounded the monster. Lin watched intently as the lights surrounded the monster. When the monster was already shining with lights, someone in the next room asked what kind of trash magic it was. It was Hubert, and he wondered if this guy couldn't even use the magic of 1 star properly. He thought that the characteristic of flame magic was to be noisy, and since it was so quiet, it seemed like this guy was still in the beginning stages. Turning away, Hubert thought with a smirk that it seemed the rumors that he was Scalzi's assistant were not true. Meanwhile, the monster continued to quietly shine from these lights, but suddenly his whole body began to crack, and then he fell to the ground, dead. With a sigh of relief, Lin noticed that he had barely managed to cope. Looking at the monster with its head smashed like a watermelon, he thought about how the flame with the hand U penetrates the target's body and melts it from the inside. But it took a full 30 seconds to melt the 2-star monster, making Lin wonder if he needed to refine the rune, and then realized that it was a possible problem in mathematical theory. Smiling to himself, he thought that he still had a lot of time to work on this. He thought that no matter how much he messed up, he would always be able to solve this problem. Before, he had never thought that magical research could be so exciting. Sitting down on the floor, he turned to Rudian again. He informed him that the theory of mechanics had been restored and the U rune had been changed. Lin noted that Rudian not only detects magic nearby, but also summarizes and reports on the research conducted during the day. Rudian informed him again about the progress, which had increased by only 0.1% today. Noticing the improvement, the boy wondered whether the mathematical theory had improved or whether the rune had become more perfect. He thought that there might be some sense in such training, but he did not think about it any further because he still had a lot of time. But then a strong gust of wind blew into his face. As it turned out, it was Hubert, who was also practicing his wind magic. Several one-eyed black monsters were flying around him. One of the monsters decided to go on the attack, and Hubert clenched his hand into a fist. And then the wind currents cut the monster into small pieces. The other 2 monsters were knocked down by the wind currents. Hubert quickly turned around and cut the bodies of these monsters with his hand, using magic. Looking at the guy who was shaking off his hand, Lin thought that he was not bad. At least it turned out well. Hubert continued training and Lin continued to watch him and noticed that something was wrong. The next day, Lin headed back to the classroom for class, where they were taught the procedure needed to cast magic. This procedure was divided into 3 parts. The first was the creation of a magic circle, the second was the engraving of the rune, and the third was mathematical calculations. Owen said that among them, many magicians have difficulty with the 3rd stage. Mathematical calculations. If at any of the stages an error in calculations is made, then a catastrophe will occur. He said that in order to prevent them from turning to coal or shattering into pieces, the magician Lin created a mathematical formula known as the Lin discriminant. Having started writing on the board, the professor said that he would now give an example, and they should try to solve it using Lin's discriminant. Taking out his pocket watch, the man said that it might be too much for them, so he would give them 10 minutes, and he said that this formula was made to be very easy even for dummies like them. The time began, and all the students held hands. Lin wondered who had passed on this formula. Thinking about his friends, he remembered that they didn't even know this formula. They barely knew how to add and subtract, so they couldn't learn it. But, delving into his memories, he thought that there was one person who could remember her. One person came to his mind, that annoying child who had proclaimed himself his disciple and stubbornly followed him around. This child was a man named Tarina. Lin wondered if he had passed it off as his idea, but then he thought that couldn't be true, since it had been 300 years ago. A touch on his shoulder pulled him out of his thoughts. Looking at Krista, he told her to let him see it if she didn't understand something, to which he responded that it was nonsense because she was a great genius. Noticing that Krista was talking, Owen gave her a non-stern look and the girl quickly apologized. The guy asked her what she wanted to ask then. Without answering, Krista handed him the box. When the guy asked what it was, she quietly said that it was cookies. Lin looked at the girl in surprise, and she said that she had stolen it because she had a little time left after her magic training. She pointed out irritably that she still owed him. Lin lazily thanked her and began to open the box. When he opened it, he didn't see any cookies, but only some coals. The girl continued to chat enthusiastically, and Lin froze in silence. Rubbing the bridge of his nose with his fingers, he wearily wondered if it was really a cookie. Still, he decided to ask again. When he received an affirmative answer, he asked her if she used mud instead of flour, to which she exclaimed that they were real. Enraged, Krista began to yell at him, but something else caught Lin's attention. He heard one of the students exclaim that he couldn't believe it had been that easy all this time. He said that Lin really was a genius, and Krista had stolen Owen's chalk. The students continued to praise Lin, saying that he was simply a god, or that he was an angel sent by God, which made Lin himself feel embarrassed. The disciples continued to talk about this. Someone said that he could be the reincarnation of a great sage, but not a god or an angel. They talked about how they envied him because he could handle any magic freely, which made Lin feel even more embarrassed and covered his face with his hand. Noticing the guy's embarrassment, Krista wondered why he was so blushing. Looking at his red face, she mockingly asked herself in her head if he was really that embarrassed because of a few cookies. She continued to smile, thinking about this proud boy being embarrassed because of the cookies. And in the meantime, Owen approached her with a threatening look. He sternly told her that for a monkey who does nothing in class, she knows how to protect herself. He asked her if she was interested in attending special classes. Krista wanted to justify herself, but she didn't have time. Owen announced the end of time and told everyone to hand in their answers. The fourth period of study was attending classes. Lin and Krista came out of the class and the girl asked him about what club he was going to join. Krista, without waiting for an answer, said that she would definitely join the Magic Volleyball Club because the descendants of the Magic family are obliged to maintain dignity while playing volleyball. Lin asked her again without interest. He asked her about the connection between volleyball and dignity. Krista didn't know what to answer, and so she started screaming, asking him why he was asking her something just to cut her off. He told her to take her time and look around, and he said goodbye to her. Krista ran after him. There are various clubs in Dilaton designed for the exchange of experiences and competitions between students, and they were created for this purpose. This is how the Combat Magic Club and the Fire Attribute Magic Club were created. A Festival Magic Club was even created. Clubs are created by students with common goals or motivations and receive funding for their activities after approval by a faculty advisor. This gives everyone the opportunity to dedicate themselves to research outside of classes. Lin thought that there were a lot of great places here, so he should look around. And he noticed with irritation that because of Krista, who was following him closely, he could not concentrate. She followed him, exclaiming that the magical family should join the volleyball club. The guy answered her that he hadn't heard that, but even if so, it was not a problem. Krista asked why it wasn't a problem, to which Lin replied that his father told him he wouldn't interfere wherever he went. Gertrude appeared from behind Krista and said that this couldn't be. She told him the same thing as Krista, in response to which Lin asked her if it was necessary. He smiled and said that he found the Fine Arts Magic Club much more interesting, and there was also this local development club. He thought happily about how in those days people were clinging to survival, but when the world became free, everyone was gradually able to do what they liked. He remembered Esther one evening talking about how when Lin grew up, the world would be a prosperous place. She hoped that Lin could protect these lives. Gertrude began waving her hand near Lin to break him out of his thoughts, but to no avail. The guy, without saying anything, walked on. The girl asked him where he was going. Lin told her that he was going to check out the local development magic club. Gertrude watched him go, wondering if he didn't know that magic volleyball was an integral part of all Soviet get-togethers. She said that the glory of the Ludwig family, which has been rivaling the Page family for over 100 years, could end with Lord Rainey. But then she remembered that the eldest daughter of the Page family had disappeared after a certain event. Smiling, she thought that even if the Ludwig family lost heart, a new era would begin under the leadership of Lady Krista. Realizing this, Gertrude turned to Krista with a joyful expression. However, there was no one behind her. Having lost all her enthusiasm, she thought about whether she could go after Lord Rain. Krista actually followed Lin, justifying herself by saying that she was just curious about what the Magical Development Club was like. Finally, they reached the hall above which the name of the club was written. As Krista continued to make excuses, Lin glanced at the sign and wondered if this was the right place. From behind the door came the voice of a guy asking how he could accept such ridiculous conditions. Krista and Lin quietly looked inside. The other guy answered him with a grin that the strong take everything. That's the main thing. DeLayton is right. Logan told the guy that the room would be useful to them, so they should give it to him. Lin asked Krista who the guy was, to which she asked him if he really didn't know. But she still said it was Logan, a junior at Chehak High. Now Lin asked about the Chehak school, and the girl told him that it was a school that specialized in producing magicians with an emphasis on martial arts. Logan asked the guy with glasses if he really wanted to settle everything with a duel, if he had the courage to fight the elder. He continued by asking why they even needed this ridiculous lust of magical development. While the other students leaned on the couple in the doorway, Krista said that this happened often, because a club needed a room to run its activities. Logan continued to say something to the guy with glasses, and the girl continued, saying that sometimes there are no free rooms and you have to take the premises of another club. Lin asked her if it could be solved with a magical duel, to which she replied in the affirmative. She said that this was the clearest and most convincing method. She asked the guy if he wanted to join. Lin walked away saying it was too annoying, and the guy with glasses exclaimed that 8 schools didn't realize it. But learning math or academic success wasn't the only reason magic existed. Logan mockingly asked him what else she needed it for, to which the guy replied that it was true that academic achievements led to the development of magic. He continued by exclaiming that agriculture and aid were areas where magic was not used. He exclaimed that if they could find a way to use magic, it would easily solve problems like poverty. Pointing his finger at Logan, he shouted at him that the seniors had created this club to make this happen. He shouted that he thinks about people who are having a hard time every day, and therefore he absolutely cannot give up this club. Logan just laughed, saying that if it were possible, the archmages and sages would have done it already. Suddenly, he came closer and grabbed the guy with glasses by the collar. Lifting him off the floor, he said that he couldn't even hold the club against a rookie, so it was all useless. He mockingly asked the guy if these seniors had produced any results. He asked if he really believed that such pathetic research, left behind by these insignificant people, could change the world. Logan told the guy that he didn't even dare fight with magic, so it should be nothing. And he asked why he wouldn't help the person in front of him rather than some stranger. Clinging to Logan's arm, the boy replied that he couldn't do that. Logan noticed that he couldn't open his eyes properly. He asked him if he had just woken up. He squeezed his collar tighter and told him to wake up quickly. Logan began to swing his arm to throw the guy, shouting that he would help him wake up now. But suddenly a flash of lightning flew into his hand, causing him to unclench his fist. The guy fell to the floor, entering the room. Lin asked Logan why he didn't have a magical duel with him. Looking at the guy, he asked him who he was. Lin replied that he was a new member of the club, his finger still emitting smoke. Rudian in the room was still reporting that the process of researching the unique magic in the surrounding space could be continued. Now the progress was almost 38%. Magic did indeed open up many possibilities, but there were still many things that magicians could not do. In the past, Lin was able to create an oasis in the middle of the desert, which means there is an opportunity to help travelers looking for water. Esther turned around and asked Lin if she could ask a question. Then she asked him if he could create spells after this journey that everyone could learn and use easily. Esther wanted these spells to help people in trouble and make their lives a little easier. Remembering Esther's request, Lin glared at Logan. Logan mockingly asked him if he really wanted to join here. Behind the guy, Logan noticed Krista, and he also noticed the guy's red eyes. Turning away from the bespectacled boy, Logan apologized for speaking his thoughts out loud and said that as a student of one of the 8 great schools, he was on his way to greet the noble Lord Rain when he encountered him. As he got closer, he noticed that he had just mentioned a magical duel. With a threatening look, he asked him if he had made a mistake. Frowning, Lin answered him that he heard correctly. He asked him about why they didn't have a duel since he wanted to fight so much. Laughing, Logan asked him if he seriously thought he could beat someone like him. Lin just laughed in response and asked him if he was really afraid. Maybe he should give in. He asked him what if he didn't use combat magic. Logan's eyes widened in surprise, and Lin asked him if that would be enough for him, or if he could only use the 3 spells that the club had developed. Logan looked dumbfounded and asked him if he was serious. Still with that same carefree grin, Lin replied that he didn't think he would lose. Logan just laughed, saying it was a total failure. Covering his mouth with his hand, he said it takes 3 days to approve membership. He said that it was therefore just a personal challenge, and Lin told him to get to the point. Logan replied that if he lost, he would surrender, and he would drive out all the troublemakers himself. But if he wins, Lord Rain will apply for expulsion from Delatane. Laughing, he said that the reason would be that he felt an insurmountable barrier after meeting Logan. Krista, unable to bear it, slammed the door. Frowning, she told him to stop joking and just stop trying to take the premises. Logan told her that outsiders should shut up. Lin agreed with him and told her to stay out of it. Krista asked him if he understood what was going on, to which he said that there was nothing to understand. He was going to win anyway. He told Logan to choose the time and date himself. Laughing, Logan asked him again if he accepted the terms. Walking past the guy, Logan said that he would invite the professor as a judge. Passing by Krista, he said that they would not delay and would meet today at 6 o'clock at the Dragon's Blood Arena. Turning around, he said with a threatening look that they would see each other there. As he walked past the students in the hallway, Logan muttered smugly that they had caught a really big fish this time, so the seniors would be pleased. He told himself that it would be a fantastic day. Krista was still standing at the door, and she asked Rain if he had forgotten his position here in order to participate in a magical duel. While leafing through the book, Lin asked her if it was because he was a freshman, to which the girl told him not to joke. Noticing that the guy was not paying attention to her, she turned around and walked away, telling him to do whatever he wanted. Lin looked after her and wondered why she was so angry. Getting up from the floor, the guy with glasses told Lin that what he did was something logically incomprehensible. The descendants of a magical family never engage in magical duels. Lin noticed a ring with a dragon with spread wings on the guy's hand, and realized that he was already a second year. Lin asked the guy why this was so. He replied that it was because you had too much to lose compared to what you gained. He said that he was more puzzled than grateful, and he asked why he had helped him. The guy replied that he wasn't going to help, but you could say it was for the task. The guy with glasses said that he was grateful anyway, but it seemed like he was underestimating Logan. Lin asked him if he was really that impressive. The guy replied that he was a king-type mage, and was especially strong against general mages who specialized in long-range magic. Moreover, thanks to his strong physical abilities and character, he has already participated in several duels and won more than 90%. Sitting down on the table, he told Rain that he had embarked on a very reckless adventure, all because he had spoken carelessly. He went on to say that he may have exaggerated when he argued with Logan. It is not such a great club. While wiping his glasses, he said that he grew up in a village and that the villagers collected money for his education here, and he decided to repay them in his own small way to make the village better. That's why he joined this club and started studying magic. But things didn't go as planned. Over time, the anxiety and worry only increased. But he continued to cling to it for his own personal reasons, but he never achieved anything. He asked Lin if it was really a shame. Laughing, the guy with glasses said that it was simply the will of God that he drop everything and take part in this duel himself. But Lin asked him what was pathetic about it. He said that he had agreed to this duel himself, and he asked if he could borrow some books related to the club's magic to look through. Taking the books, Lin walked away, saying that he would return them when the duel was over. The guy with glasses called out to him. Suddenly, Lin asked him if he knew why Archmage Lin started practicing magic. He himself answered by saying that he started it to survive, and everyone starts for personal reasons. Lin walked down the hallway to the sound of other students sniffing, wondering if the rumors had already spread. Catching glances at himself, he thought that this was more than expected. Suddenly, someone called him sharply, causing him to flinch. Turning around, he noticed his Aunt Elin, all sweaty, asking him how he was doing. Before Lin could respond, Elin ran up to him and punched him in the chin. Just recently, she received news that the genius of the Ludwig family was participating in a magical duel. Rubbing his cheek with her fist aggressively, She said that she must have misheard that he was starting a duel. But Lin told her honestly that it was true. Squeezing her nephew tighter, Elin said that her nephew had caused quite a stir, and for that she needed to drink some liquor. After letting the guy go, she told him that if Logan hit him, it would hurt several times more, and she asked him what he was even thinking. Looking at his aunt's back, Lin asked her if she was worried about him. Running up to him, she screamed, asking him if she really looked like a pathetic aunt who was worried and asking about someone like him. Tapping her finger on his chin, she said that he would only come to his senses after he got a good beating from Logan. Puffing with irritation, Elin walked away down the corridor. Rubbing his cheek, Lin apologized to his aunt and told her that he didn't know that wasn't allowed. But he assured her that it did not bring shame on their family. Elin replied that it was already connected, because of his thoughtless actions. In the worst case, it would end in expulsion. And then she said that everything was fine. She was still irritated by those who laughed at him as if he were a worthless offspring. She smiled and looked at the guy and told him to trample them properly when he left with victory, since he started it. She exclaimed that the name of the Ludwig family was on his shoulders, so he must do something that others could not even think of, to rise to his level. Lin smirked, and Elin told him to teach them a lesson. At 6 o'clock in the arena, Lin and Logan met. The stands were filled with people. Lin thought that his aunt need not worry, since that had been his intention all along. Some students in the classes noticed others running somewhere. All the students came running to watch this duel. All eyes were on the worthless loser and jock from Chaycock. Professor Caroline asked Professor Owen who he supported. Logan from the same faction, or Rain, whose student was being sent. Owen replied that status, pedigree, or education meant nothing to him. He simply replied that he would support the one who was stronger. Judge Theon entered the arena and announced himself. He announced that this duel was officially sanctioned by the school. Therefore, the winner must fulfill the conditions of the winner set by the school. The judge told the challengers to step forward. Logan took a step forward, throwing his cloak off his shoulders and revealing his chest, hidden by bandages. Lin looked him over and asked him if he had prepared too much for the battle against the failed nobleman. Krista said that it would be difficult to defeat him. Gertrude secretly approached her and told her over her shoulder that she had come after all. Krista waved her hands and began to justify herself, saying that she didn't come here because she was worried, but just wanted to see how this guy would get beaten up. Gertrude gave her an understanding smile. Caroline thought that apprentice mages had very long casting times, so mages who could immediately engage in close combat were a threat. She wondered how he would fight it, and in the meantime, Lin began to twirl something in his hands under his cloak. The crowd froze in surprise. Someone even whistled. As it turned out, there was a cleaning broom hidden under Lin's cloak. Logan froze with a shocked expression on his face. He said he thought he was holding some kind of wooden stick, but this was too much. The entire stadium burst into loud laughter. The professors looked at this with ambiguous expressions on their faces, and mockery was heard from the students. Krista covered her face with her hand in shame, and Gertrude simply froze in shock. Judge Theon asked the guy what it was, to which Lin replied that he took it from the library. Fortunately, the cleaning had just finished. The judge asked him if he was going to use it for a duel, to which Lin asked him if it was prohibited, to which he said it was not prohibited. Logan asked the guy if he was really so easy to indulge. He noted that he used to be so confident in himself, and now he came with a broom. He told him that they could finish now. He could just give in and not embarrass himself. Lin told him that it had always been that way since he came to the university. He noted that from a senior's perspective, it was truly unfortunate. Logan asked him, confused, which senior he was talking about. But Lin didn't answer him, but only continued, asking him why young people at this time are so good only at empty talk. They are not witches sending curses. He asked him since when magicians began to win with words. Judge Theon told the boys that they were getting too close and he told them to move away. After clearing his throat, the judge said that he would now announce the final confirmation before the duel. He announced that if Logan lost, he would serve as a security guard at the local magical development club until he graduated. Otherwise, Rain will be expelled from Delayton. The judge asked them if they agreed to these terms, and the boys answered yes in unison. Theon, raising his hand with a spell, told them to disperse. Logan and Lin moved a few meters apart and the referee began the countdown. Using magic, he summoned a golden clock that began to count down 10 seconds. Students from all over the university ran to the duel. Elin's assistant asked her if she wanted to take a look, and she would sort it out, to which she replied that she didn't want to. The assistant noticed that she was so calm when her nephew was facing a serious test. Elin asked her threateningly if this meant that she could not remain calm. Elin turned to the window, and the assistant began to say that she had not meant it. Smiling to herself, she mentally told her brother that Rain could be a sage. As Logan began to remove the bandages from his chest, he said there was no need to watch. He said that the outcome was already predetermined. 10 seconds passed and Logan ripped off his bandages, telling his opponent to watch carefully. He shouted at him that once he was expelled, he would no longer have the opportunity to see it. Waving his hand, Logan cast a spell on the mark on his chest and exclaimed that this was the secret technique of the Chehak school, strengthening the body. Gertrude noticed that he seemed to be going to finish it in one go. The mark on Logan's body glowed green, and that green light began to flow through his veins. Noticing the speed of the spell's activation, Hubert thought that a small mistake could lead to broken bones or ruptured internal organs. Caroline thought that it was no wonder that Logan was considered one of the great graduates of Chehak school. Lin gripped his broom tighter. Lin closed his eyes and exhaled, collecting his thoughts. Logan's eyes turned red from the strain, and he exclaimed that he would finish this in 10 seconds. Lin continued to stand in place, and Logan jumped up and rushed forward. Lin stood there with his eyes closed, even as his opponent came very close to him. As Logan raised his fist to strike, he thought that this guy couldn't even move, but the result would be the same even if he could. He thought that body fortification was a spell that both attacked and defended. It created a wall of magical power on the surface of the body to defend and exploded the magic at the point of impact to damage the opponent. As he flew forward, he thought that this could not be stopped. He would end this duel with this blow. But suddenly, a broom handle approached his fist. Lin began to spin the broom in his hand, pushing away his opponent's hand. But he didn't stop there. Turning around on the spot, he swung the broom. Lin swung his arms and hit Logan hard in the chest with the broom. The force of the blow sent Logan flying upward. The professor's eyes widened and they froze in shock. No one expected that Logan would fly back with one blow from some broom. Owen noticed that it was a staff technique from the Osiris school. He remembered that 300 years ago, this amazing achievement elevated the Osiris school to the rank of one of the 8 major schools. This staff technique was developed by the great magician Lin. He thought that even mages needed strength to engage in close combat. That's why it is said that he created this technique with the help of the hero Esther. He wondered how the heir of the Ludwig family had mastered this technique. And in the meantime, Logan woke up. He immediately turned around in the air and landed on the ground a few meters from the enemy. Caroline kept her eyes on Rain, still surprised. She noticed that even from such a blow, the broom was not yet broken. She thought about how if the guy hit the body surrounded by body reinforcement with a normal broom, it should have shattered into pieces, she replied. The incredible magic control that was needed to enhance the strength of this broom. She wondered what this guy really was. Lin twirled the broom and threw it over his shoulder, and the entire stadium exploded with cries of delight. They started shouting that Logan had simply been thrown out while he was still on his knees. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his chest, and saliva began to flow from his mouth. As he leaned on the ground, he thought that the reinforcement of his body had been broken, and he couldn't believe that it had happened with the broom that this useless scum had used. Lin said mockingly that 10 seconds had already passed and the end had not yet come. The guy said it wasn't fun to torment a promising junior, to which Logan shot him an angry look. Twirling the broom between his fingers, Lin said he was done in 6 seconds. He moved the broom behind his back and told his opponent to attack. Logan stood up with difficulty, thinking that he was showing off just because he was able to land a punch. Deciding to take a different approach, Logan quickly lifted his leg. Releasing magic, he smashed the ground with force, shattering it into small pieces. The destruction reached Lin too, causing him to jump. Logan didn't stop there and jumped up, swinging his leg. The guy kicked one of the fragments in the air with all his might, shattering it into even smaller pieces. These pieces flew straight at Lin, but he successfully deflected them with a broom. All the fragments fell to the ground and silence fell over the arena. Not noticing his opponent nearby, Lin began to look around. He slammed the end of his broom onto the ground, casting a spell. And suddenly, a huge boulder started flowing from the dust towards Lin. But Lin managed to notice him in time and fight him off with a broom. But in the meantime, Logan jumped up to kick his opponent. The guy flew down with force, bringing with him a roar and even greater destruction. After a couple of seconds, everything became quiet and someone's figure appeared among the dust. That someone turned out to be Logan, whose feet were stuck in quicksand. From somewhere, Lin's voice came, saying that he had heard that this magical remedy was used for plowing fields. Logan looked up where Lin couldn't remember the name of the spell and said it was 1-star level anyway. Lin stood on top of the pile of rubble and he said that this spell, which creates a temporary dam during a flood, was already 2-star. He smirked and asked Logan how he felt about it, if he found it useful. After the crushing defeat, a roar swept through the stands. Some spectators whispered in bewilderment, others shouted in admiration. Owen chuckled, noting how deftly Lin had neutralized Logan's close combat with a well-thought-out strategy. The man was amazed that the guy not only predicted the attack and turned the ground into mud, but also cast 2 spells almost simultaneously, binding the enemy. Caroline thought. No one expected him to be capable of such precise mental calculation. Owen glanced around the stands and concluded that the fight would soon be over. But suddenly Lin swung his hand sharply, throwing his broom down, right at Logan's feet. The professors froze in shock. Their mouths dropped open in surprise and their eyes widened. Krista jumped up from her seat and screamed, demanding an explanation of why he did this. She shouted that he should have just used a ranged spell and ended the fight without further ado. However, before the broom could reach him, Logan, gathering his last strength, managed to escape from the mud trap. His blow shattered the broom into pieces, and he himself, without slowing down, rushed forward to attack. Logan's fist froze a centimeter from Lin's face. At the same moment, a vine wrapped around his wrist. Logan froze in amazement as he realized that his entire body was now entangled in living vines, restricting his movement. Lin calmly explained that this was the 3rd spell, reviving dead plants, and the stands exploded with new exclamations of surprise. He added that the effect would only last 10 seconds, but that was enough. And Logan noted with annoyance that the vines were created from the remains of his own broom. Breaking off one of the branches, Lin reminded him that he kept his word and only used 3 spells as he promised. He leaned over to his fallen opponent, placed the sharp end of the branch against his face and asked, "Isn't it time to end this fight?" Logan's face was veined with rage, and he gritted his teeth, but he couldn't move to break free from the wooden bonds. Casting an angry glance at Lin, he thought that he could not allow such a disgrace. To lose like this, without a fight. Suddenly he was distracted by a sharp tightening of the vines around his body, and he jerked in surprise and almost screamed. Lin, noticing this, muttered thoughtfully that perhaps he had put too much magical power into the spell. He mused out loud that the vines were too sticky due to the nature of the plant, but overall the technique needed some work. He then reassured Logan, telling him not to worry, but he still flinched when the sharp end of the branch came close to his face again. Lin looked at him with an icy gaze and said that he would soon feel more comfortable. Instead of gouging out the eye, he hit Logan on the head with the blunt end of the stick. Logan shouted after him that he promised to finish it all with one blow and not to mock him. Lin responded indifferently that the fight was already over and Logan should accept defeat. He ordered him to shut up, since he had already lost, and not to disgrace himself further. Then, turning around, he asked Logan if he now understood what it was like to be hit, and advised him to change if he didn't want a repeat of it. The stone platform beneath Lin's feet began to crumble, sending him plummeting downwards, leaving Logan hanging helplessly in the vines. Logan couldn't believe what was happening. For the first time in his life, he felt so helpless, as if he was that boy again that everyone laughed at. Memories came flooding back. The taunts that he was only pretending to be a magician, the shouts for him to stop embarrassing himself and stand up like a man. He always believed that magic was a world of power where the weak did not survive, but now that the vines began to crumble, he simply collapsed. Lin, watching this, noted to himself that the vines lasted longer than expected, meaning the spell had potential. But then he remembered that a duel officially ends only when one of the parties is completely defeated, and he decided to deliver the final blow. Before Logan could come to his senses, something heavy hit him in the head, and his consciousness went black. Lin explained that the outcome had already been determined, so it was not an attack, but simply a point in the fight. A stunned Logan fell to the ground unconscious. The judge sighed and raised his hand, summoning a flying microphone. "The winner is Ryan Ludwig," echoed throughout the stadium, and the applause grew even louder. As the stadium applauded, Lin looked around and noticed a familiar figure hurrying towards the arena. It was the president of the club who had started it all. A breathless guy running towards him, waving his arms. He began to thank Lin for his kindness, but Lin interrupted him, asking what kindness he was talking about. Lin noted that in all 3 spells he felt the guy had potential, although not perfect. He added that the efforts of the senior students were clearly not in vain. Then, as if realizing it, Lin sheepishly apologized for the lecture and fell silent. But a second later he asked the club president if he could ask for one favor. "Continue to develop local magic so that I don't have to interfere again," he said. He confidently added that everything would work out for him and turned around to leave. The guy in glasses, barely holding back a smile, bowed low behind him, unable to hide his delight. As Lin left, he wondered what Esther would say at such a moment. He immediately pushed these thoughts away, because he was not Esther, but he still wondered if he had managed to maintain his dignity. By evening, The news of the nobleman's victory over Logan had spread throughout the dormitory. The students heatedly discussed what had happened, one shouting that it was impossible, while another claimed that he had seen everything with his own eyes. Logan was lying in the infirmary and heard the students outside the window saying that the guy's skills were serious, since he was able to not only win, but also lecture Logan before knocking him out. Logan sat up abruptly in bed, but immediately grabbed his head in pain. Owen's voice came from nearby, asking how it felt to bring shame on his school. Logan looked at him and replied grimly that his punishment had already caught up with him. He greeted his mentor, but he cut him off abruptly, reminding him that he was a professor here, not an old friend. Logan quickly bowed and apologized, trying to make amends. Owen sighed and told him to rest and recuperate. Clenching his fists, Logan muttered quietly that the elders would beat him to death now. Owen turned away and said that he shouldn't think he was a genius just because he was considered an elite. After a pause, he asked if Logan knew anything about Scalzi Ludwig. He explained that, according to the students from Rivendell, this old man had kept Rain as his assistant for 3 years. If even the heartless Scalzi tolerated him for 3 years, it means that this guy's abilities are truly impressive. Logan thought angrily that he would never acknowledge the eldest son in such a family. Owen advised him to establish connections with Rain now, because one day he will become an important figure in the magical world, but Logan sharply refused. He shouted in irritation that this guy was a disgrace, and next time he would definitely beat him. Owen also started to get angry and asked if Logan was so stupid that he couldn't see the obvious. He asked sharply who was really the disgrace if Rain defeated him in close combat, and even felt sorry for him. Owen added that he was the one who observed Rain the closest, and understood his strength better than anyone else. But if Logan can't realize this, then let him do whatever he wants. As he left, Owen reminded him that since Logan lost the duel, he had to fulfill his promise. Left alone, Logan admitted defeat through clenched teeth. He muttered that he was not at all afraid of Rain, but kept silent out of respect for his elder. 15 minutes before the duel, Lin went to the Delathan Central Library, where thousands of books, biographies, and historical records were kept. Lin found it strange that his own diaries and biography were now lying before him, already part of history. He approached the librarian and showed him the list of books he wanted to find. The girl looked through the list, then took out several volumes and placed them in front of him. These were The Life and Achievements of the Palace Archer Caius and the Fire Dragon Priestess Frida. Seeing them, Lin smiled slightly, remembering the past. He remembered how Frida had proposed a bet on whose biography would be longer. Lin then asked why he should care about a rating compiled by a stranger, to which Frida replied that he didn't have confidence in himself. She laughed, came closer, and asked if he was afraid because he was arguing with the legendary priestess. While Esther was training, they continued to argue, and eventually Lin accepted the challenge. Holding a huge boulder, Esther suddenly said that she was betting on Lin. Frida laughed, calling it an obvious choice since she always spoiled him, while Esther wiped the sweat from her face. Lin asked why she chose him anyway. Esther laughed awkwardly and said there were many reasons, but he insisted on an answer. He didn't back down, demanding honesty, and the smile slowly faded from her face. She admitted that due to the limitations of her lineage, she would not be able to live long. Kays was older than all of them, so his life would also be short, and Frida would not outlive him by much. But Lin is still young, and therefore his biography will be the longest. Smiling awkwardly, she added that this was precisely why his book would be thicker. She laughed and said that the future was unknown, but she hoped to see his biography one day. Remembering this, Lin bitterly thought that he had died first. He looked at the book in Frida's hands and mentally congratulated her on winning their argument. Comparing the thickness of the volumes, he noticed that Kays' biography was still slightly larger. Opening the book, Lin began to read about how Kays, known as the Holy Archer, founded the Drunken Archers School, where they taught archery even when drunk. As Lin continued reading the book, he was surprised to learn that Kays had married a noblewoman 20 years his junior and had descendants. Smiling, the boy realized that his friend must have lived a happy life. Lin put down the book about Kays and picked up the book about Frida. As he leafed through the book, he noticed that there were no entries after 1168. He read there that she had led the Republic for a long time as a priestess, but her subsequent whereabouts were unknown. She did not appear until 1200, and the Republican Association of Witches officially announced her death. Lin couldn't believe that Frida, who loved being the center of attention, died alone. But he didn't think too much about it, deciding that this could have happened. She could have changed. But the very next moment he changed his mind again, because he could not come to terms with this information. He knew Frida better than anyone alive, so she certainly couldn't die alone. Lin thought that there was definitely some kind of incident that was bound to happen. The thought crept into his head that she had simply been made to disappear. Lin's head couldn't get over the fact that the altar priestess who saved the world simply disappeared, and no one noticed anything. The boy was pulled away from his thoughts when he noticed that he was gripping the page of the book tightly. Forcing himself to relax, he thought that this book would not be suitable. He decided to look for books from the Republic. The librarian came up to him and said that if he was studying Esther's group, then he should read this book too. Thinking it was a book about Esther, Lin thought he shouldn't read it, but he still couldn't help but accept it. But when he looked at the title, he was surprised because the book was not about Esther. It was called The Ash Shaman, Terena. At the sight of this name, the image of a girl with blue eyes immediately appeared in the guy's head, who happily called him master. Noticing the strange expression on the guy's face, the librarian asked him what was wrong, to which he replied that everything was fine. As Lin leafed through the book, he wondered if that little girl had actually become a shaman. A shaman who commands spirits belongs to the fourth highest class of witches. Not every witch is able to reach this level. Lin wondered if she had become more successful than Frida. Running his eyes down the page, he noticed the dates of Terena's life. The guy thought that this didn't make sense because a person couldn't live that long. Still debating whether he should get the book from the Republic, Lin heard a sound. He immediately realized that he was signaling that it was time for a duel. The guy lazily thought that he needed to go, even though it was none of his business. Getting up from the table, Lin asked the librarian if she could keep the book. Taking the broom, Lin went to the duel, and the girl promised to keep it, but if someone asked to give it back, she would have to do it. Lin told her not to worry because he would be back in just 15 minutes. After finishing the magical duel with Logan, the guy rushed back to the library. He saw that the librarian Karen looked very agitated and was looking for something. Karen asked the guy if he had taken the book, to which he replied no. Lin asked her if the book was missing, to which she replied that when she finished her business, the book was gone, and no one could have taken it out, because if they hadn't taken it out of the library, the sound signal would have gone off. As Karen continued to babble nervously, Lin looked at her and thought that it didn't look like she was lying. But not much time had passed. Karen continued to apologize non-stop when Lin got an idea. Interrupting the girl, he told her that they could just buy a new one. The guy said he would pay for the book so she could make it look like he had lost it, to which Karen exclaimed that that wasn't necessary. After some more persuasion, Lin was able to convince the girl, thinking that this was not something he should be principled about, but she was very attentive. Suddenly, Karen said that she was surprised that a person like him existed, and she thanked him sincerely with a smile on her face. As night approached, Lin returned to his dorm room and lay down on his bed. He thought about how lately he was constantly hearing thanks. Thinking about the head of the club, he thought that it was a waste of time, but he doesn't feel bad, which is strange. He thought that it might be because his body had changed, or maybe he had become more free in life. In any case, he should think about the incident. Sitting up in bed, he noticed that there were many strange things about this case. He remembered that the diary he had entrusted to Esther had returned to him, and just when he had begun to investigate the companion's past, Terena's chronicle had disappeared. Could it have been Terena herself? Lin thought it was impossible. She was already dead herself. Those times were 300 years ago. Everyone he knew was already dead. Angry, Lin began to actively think about who it could be. He took a book from the nightstand and opened it, and Rudian flew out of the book. A message has appeared stating that the research progress of unique magic in the surrounding space is 37.9%. Lin couldn't understand how it was that his progress had increased. He thought about how all he did was beat people. He wondered if using magic against people actually increased progress. He began to think about whether he should use more violence to become stronger, but immediately stopped such thoughts. The guy decided not to worry and think it over. He thought that although power can rule the world, it doesn't seem like it works only through power. He noted that he did nothing else, and the increase in magic when he used it on inanimate objects was minimal. But after the fight with Logan, who is a living being, it increased by almost a whole %. Getting out of bed and stretching, Lin thought that there were no other clues yet, so maybe it was worth checking. He thought that using magic against living beings inside the school might be problematic, so maybe he should try becoming an adventurer. When he thought about it, he realized that he would still need money to buy books. He asked that it wouldn't be so bad. The day after the resounding victory, many girls crowded around Rain, trying to get his attention. Looking up from his book, Lin sternly told them that he had no desire to remember their names or get closer, and asked them to leave. The girls only laughed in response, telling him not to be so embarrassed. The young men began to talk about how this Rain was deceiving girls again. Lin listened with a dark face about how he had been seducing someone since early morning. Krista walked between the girls with a stony face, ordering the girls to clear the way. The girls immediately ran in different directions, and Krista took her place next to Rain. Gertrude walked up to Rain and whispered in his ear, asking him if his last name was Casanova. And then, proud of herself, Gertrude went to her place. Lin was about to turn to Krista when she sternly asked him if he could not talk to her. Taken aback, the guy asked her if she was angry, to which the girl, interrupting him, said that she asked him not to talk to her. Leafing through the book, she calmly said that they had already talked. There was no point in it anymore. Lin assumed she was angry about the magical confrontation, and sighing, he said that they were certainly not friends anymore. Slamming the book down angrily, Krista told the guy that she wasn't angry and was genuinely happy. Looking at the guy, she said that it was unpleasant for her to watch him pretend to be weak, having such skills. She told him that strong people had to show their strength, so he needed to square his shoulders and walk with confidence, and she said that he had won over her and Logan. Slamming the book on the table, the girl said that thanks to this, she could now trample him, and she thanked him for the fact that now she would no longer hear any talk about bullying the weak. Pointing her finger at Rain, Krista said that next time she would grind him into dust. Everyone else in the class couldn't help but hear Krista's screams, and they assumed that Rain and the top student were arguing. They noted that it was simply a great confrontation. Lin noticed that it was Owen's job and asked her if she would stand there any longer and have her points deducted. Having come to her senses, Krista sat up and calmly thanked the guy. Gertrude thought that if she had rehearsed this dialogue all night, she must have at least tried. When Lin came back to the library, Karen told him that they had a problem. When the guy asked what the problem was, the girl replied that it seemed like all the books about terrain had been discontinued, and all the publishers had reported that there were no books and there wouldn't be any. Lin asked about the reason for such an event, to which Karen told him that it was not exactly known, but they say that the Golden Children, the body for investigating the heresy of the Light of the Dragon Church, suddenly put all books related to Terraina on the censorship list this year. The guy couldn't understand why she was considered a heretic after her death. He asked the girl if she had read these books, to which she replied that, of course she had. She said that since she worked in the Central Library, these books were required reading. Besides, she was a follower of the Archmage Lin and Frida, the Dragon Priestess, and Terraina left behind as many great achievements as those two. This information did not surprise the guy. Lin asked her if there was anything strange in those books, something like black magic. Karen replied that she didn't remember such a thing, and since it was a biography, even if there had been any dangerous content, it would have been censored. The guy shrugged and said that they needed to go to the black market, and the girl asked why. Lin said that there was everything there, from books that had fallen under the status of heresy to magical items destroyed in the pool, so he would quickly be able to find works related to Terraina. Karen voiced her suspicions about the price. Since the books were censored, Lin thought that this could actually be a problem, and it would be difficult to ask the family to buy something like this. Karen said it would cost at least 3 gold, so her salary wouldn't be enough. Scratching his head, the boy thought that he needed to find money, but he thought that in this life he would not have to worry about such things. He thought about how he could get a lot of money in a short period of time. The first of his ideas was to sell magic on the street. Next, he thought about becoming a teacher. But all this took a lot of time, so the only thing left to do is move on to a strategy with high returns and risks. Thinking about where he could make money by risking his life, Lin immediately realized what he had to do. Turning around, Lin thanked Karen and said he was leaving. The girl asked him where he was going, to which the guy replied that he needed to try something. He said confidently that he was going to take part in an adventure and make money at the same time. Hearing this, Karen rushed to stop him, saying that he couldn't do such a thing with his status, and she would sort everything out herself. The guy quickly stopped her, saying that this was the only quick way that came to his mind. The next morning, one of the library workers noticed that Rain Ludwig had taken Terraina's biography. He said that a first-year student during the first semester can't take something like that, and he asked who gave him the book. The girl standing next to him answered that it was Karen, who had been working for them for 4 months. The worker asked the girl where she was, to which she replied that she had a day off. A girl passing by overheard a conversation about how Karen had not yet received permission to issue books, and apparently Rain had been begging her for a long time, but the worker said that she was not the one to make mistakes. The girl suggested that the name might have been written incorrectly, and Professor Elin often comes here. The workers noticed that Karen's handwriting was very messy, making it really difficult to tell who had taken the book. And since everyone is talking about Rain right now, Karen might have accidentally made a mistake. Besides, she's been spending a lot of time with Rain lately, And when she's in love, she could make even worse mistakes. The worker decided that there was no problem then, and you just need to correct the reader's name to Professor Eland's. If we talk about adventurers in the past, their work was always dangerous but at the same time profitable. There was still a chance to run into scammers among such people. However, now it has taken on a different form. Adventurers are either masters of combat who help people or mercenaries who exterminate monsters. If they reach the highest level, they will be treated as a hero. Lin entered the Adventurers Association building, and conversations could be heard from all sides. The guy heard talk about how things were going well with earnings lately. It wasn't the same feeling without dead ends and labyrinths. To which another man said that after the Red Dragon Legion left, the mountain range was full of monsters. It was literally a gold mine. Others said that the spider rats were a nuisance and dangerous, but the rewards were substantial. Lin decided for himself that he would then go after these spider rats. Approaching the counter where the girl was standing, Lin said that he wanted to register with the association. The girl asked him to show his ID or student card, since he was a student. The guy asked her how long the registration would take, to which the girl, taking his student ID, said that she would just check his details and it would be done. Looking at his student ID, the girl noticed that he was Ludwig, and she was talking to him like a commoner. She couldn't understand why he needed to register as an adventurer at all, and Lin asked if there was anything else required. Handing over the piece of paper, the girl told him to fill in the necessary information in this section. Pointing her finger, she told him to be sure to check the last part. Lin asked what it was. Lighting a stick, the girl replied that it was a special form for noble families, something like that they were not responsible for problems that arose during work. The guy asked if there were people who tried to hold the guild accountable. The girl replied that she had heard that this happened often 100 years ago, so they developed such an agreement. Handing over her ID, she said that registration was complete. Now his ID is made of iron, then the level will rise in turn. Brass, silver, gold, platinum, diamond. Lin asked if everyone started at the bottom, to which she replied that this was not always the case. If a person had combat experience before becoming an adventurer, then the level in the association will depend on the level of the above. This simply shows whether someone has the ability to carry out assignments. The girl continued to explain, saying that you need to pass an exam to reach the level, but the guy interrupted her, saying that he understood everything. She asked him if he wanted to know anything else, to which he replied that that was enough for him. The girl wished him success and said that the higher his level, the more difficult work he would be offered. Looking at the entire ID with a smile on his face, Lin thought that now he had the opportunity to receive a reward for exterminating monsters, and with the ID, he could enter dangerous areas, thereby increasing his scope of activity. He calculated that he now had 44 silver coins, and he decided that he would first catch the rat spider that people had talked about. Looking at the quest rack, he noticed that one head was worth 2 silvers, and it looked like they were pretty weak to be worth that much. Scratching his head, the guy said that all he could do was catch as many as possible. Deciding to get down to business, Lin headed to Dragon Peak. Looking around at the red peak and the city in front of it, he noticed that the place had changed a lot. As he entered the city with the red arches, he immediately heard someone selling life force potions for 10 coppers. People immediately started buying up the potions at such a low price. Lin thought that with the dragons controlling this territory, everything here was occupied by monsters. The merchant, noticing the adventurer, told him that if he went further, he would run into monsters, and he advised him to buy a potion, but Lin simply walked on. A tall staircase appeared in front of the guy, and he thought that this staircase leading to the dragon's abode was still in place. Crouching down to take a closer look at the steps, Lin noticed that they were kept clean. Smiling, he mentally addressed Frida, saying that it was good, her house was safe and sound. Rising to his feet, Lin stretched and said that he had looked everything over, so now he was going to destroy all the pests on this land. But suddenly from behind he heard a voice calling him. The girl asked him if he was a magician, and then she said that it was useless to hide, you can't fool her eyes. Lin told her that he wasn't hiding. He asked her if everyone could tell who he was just by looking at her uniform and asked her why she was bragging, to which she told him to shut up. The stranger invited him to join their group. They just lacked a magician to complete the team. Lin asked again, and the girl enthusiastically decided to introduce everyone. A huge man appeared behind the guy, whom the girl introduced as Bart. Lin turned around in fear and met his gaze, and the girl continued saying that he was a very strong silver-level fighter. Lin finished telling her not to play a prank on him. He can't be human because he looks like a monster, to which the stranger told him to be more polite because Bart is sensitive. Behind the girl stood another guy, whom she introduced as Sam. He was a priest and a doctor. And finally, she exclaimed that her name was Rem, and she was a genius shooter. Looking at this suspicious group, Lin asked them if they were a group of criminals waiting for entry-level adventurers. Rem asked again, in response to which Lin asked them if they were really trafficking people and using their abductions as a cover for joining the group. Bart's eyes widened in menace, causing Lin to flinch. Noticing the strange expression on the man's face, Lin shouted at him that they could fight if they wanted to. But suddenly this huge, menacing man burst into tears, and Ram and Sam began to calm him down, saying that this was not the first time something like this had happened to them. Lin asked the girl why they needed someone with an iron level at all. Rem replied that they didn't care about his level at all. She identified people by smell, and she noted with a smug smile that he was strong. She said that Bart simply couldn't bear the thought of walking alone on a mountain road infested with monsters. Sam said that young students sometimes get into trouble when they come to earn money. He told the guy that they were not insisting and he could go, but he should be careful. Lin turned and walked away, saying that he felt more comfortable acting alone. Rem sighed and said that nothing could be done. She continued to reassure Bart that everything would be fine with this guy. Once Bart had calmed down a bit, Lin heard Rem say that it was time for them to go exterminate the spider rats, and they already knew where they were, so they could just go have some fun. Rem took a map out of her bag, but suddenly Lin came up to her and grabbed her by the shoulder. With a wry smile, Lin introduced himself as Rain and exclaimed that if they needed any magic, they could feel free to contact him. And so, together with 3 new comrades, Lin set out on his first hunt as an adventurer. Meanwhile, somewhere deep in the cave, a huge monster on 8 legs was crawling around, with many bones lying around it. Somewhere in the forest, one of the rat spiders was gnawing on a tree, when suddenly a voice was heard that said that they had been walking for quite a long time, and there was no trace of these rats. Bart said that these creatures are very shy, so they hide, but here and there are traces of gnawed trees, so they are definitely somewhere nearby. Bart asked Rain if he was okay with splitting the reward 4 for 4, to which Rain said it was fine. Rem crouched down to examine the gnawed tree, and Bart asked the guy if he knew anything about these creatures, in response to which he asked him to tell. The man said that spider rats are monsters with the body of a spider and the head of a rat. They live in colonies, which include a queen, an army, and workers. The latter are carnivorous pests that gnaw trees, and the warriors attack people. Lin asked about the queen who was not on the mission. Sam told him that it was because this colony did not have a queen. The man said that the army is being exterminated, but the queen, who almost never comes to the surface, is not touched. This is the basic strategy. Lin asked why they weren't touching her. Shouldn't they all be exterminated? To which Bart replied that the danger of the queen was no match for the army, and that finding her would require a full-scale operation that cost a lot of money. Smiling, Lin noted that if such a monster were caught, the reward would be appropriate. Rem continued to search for rats, digging in the grass. And she said that in this colony there are none anyway, but it is difficult to catch her because she is a tough opponent even for skilled adventurers. Finally finding the rat somewhere in a ditch, Rem jumped into it with a loud scream. The spider rats looked up at the girl, looking up from eating the deer. On the fly, the girl took out her bow and quickly fired several arrows. Bart also set to work, cutting the rats in half. While Ram and Bart were actively fighting, Sam and Lin stood aside and watched. Somewhere above, another adventurer appeared, who called out to his comrades, shouting at them to come here, because there was a whole bunch of them here. Rem shouted at Bart to hurry up and deal with the others. Lin asked Sam if he could really not fight and get his share for this matter. The man answered him that it would be enough if he later made a fire and got water. Sam told the guy that the two of them had never intended to involve him in the fight in the first place, to which the guy replied that he didn't understand why they even invited him into the group. Sam said they just genuinely wanted to help. Recalling the old days, he said that the same thing happened to him. He had to earn money to pass the exam to become a priest, and they, only after hearing this, accepted him into their group, although they saw him for the first time in their lives. He had already collected the necessary amount long ago, but he was still with them, and when they were together, he could feel the love of God. Lin asked if he was talking about unconditional love and remarked that God would like that. Sam just laughed in response. The man said he didn't know the reason. He felt a sense of unity that religion couldn't describe. He said it was like wanting to be one, and the reason is simply because it's a lot of fun. Sam said that the days spent together, the travels they took together, made his chest feel warm. The man quickly came to his senses, apologizing to the guy for talking so much and saying that he, as a follower of God, should be ashamed. But Lin suddenly agreed with a smile, saying that traveling with someone really is great. Remembering his comrades, Lin suddenly remembered terrain. He asked Sam if he knew about terrain. The man asked him if he was talking about the Ash Shaman. While the adventurers were chasing rats, Sam calmly told them that everyone knew her. Lin asked him if the church had recognized her as a heretic. The man replied that it seemed so, but at the same time it seemed as if it wasn't. Meanwhile, the adventurer, who had run away from his comrades, met a huge monster. Sam and Lin's conversation was interrupted when they heard a loud scream. Everything around shook. The adventurers began to look around, not understanding what was happening. But then a huge spider rat came into their field of vision, with the body of that adventurer sticking out of its mouth. Rem immediately tensed up when she noticed this monster and cursed quietly. The huge monster was getting closer and closer to the adventurers, looking at them with its dark eyes. Everyone screamed in panic that it was the queen. Lin panicked and asked Sam how this happened, because they said that this colony did not have a queen. Sam only noted its size and said that this queen was twice as big as usual. Rem answered the guy that everyone had simply forgotten about this queen a long time ago. With her red eyes shining, the queen raised her head and screamed piercingly. The adventurers immediately panicked and ran away. Bart shouted after the fleeing men to stop, because they needed to fight her face to face. Feeling something strange, Sam yelled at Rem and Bart that they better leave. Rem replied that there was no problem, the queen was just a huge rat, to which the man responded that that was not the issue. The man exclaimed that when the queen appears, the remaining individuals turn into groups of mass murderers. The monster's eyes glowed red, and they began to attack everyone around them. Taking out a bottle of alcohol and taking a sip from it, Rem began shooting, exclaiming that this was why the young were useless here. Bart, breaking the rats into pieces, shouted to Rem that there was no point in catching these small fry. They needed to target the queen, to which the girl replied that she knew. Rem yelled at Sam to heal the newbies and at Reyna to protect Sam. Taking 4 arrows from her quiver at once, the girl shot at the queen with a precise and quick movement. All 4 arrows hit the queen in the eye, causing her to let out another piercing screech. Hearing this cry, Lin turned around and noticed that all the arrows hit at the same time. A bunch of small monsters wanted to pounce on Rem, but Bart appeared in front of the girl, chopping them with his axe. Having pushed aside the crowd of monsters, the girl and the man ran to the queen. Continuing to suffer from her damaged eye, the queen did not have time to do anything, and Bart managed to run up to her and hit her on the head. Noticing this, the other adventurers immediately perked up and began to smile. The queen stopped moving. Her eyes rolled back, drool began to flow from her open mouth, and everyone decided that she was dead. But then Lin noticed that black liquid began to ooze from the wound where the blade of the axe had hit. The boy shouted at the man to run away quickly, otherwise he would die if he touched him. Leaving the weapon in the monster's skull, Bart rushed away, managing to run away a moment before the black liquid gushed out like a fountain. The other adventurers, who were still fighting off the other rats, suspected something was wrong, because it wasn't blood. As it turned out, the queen was not dead. She grabbed the axe in her skull with her paws. With a squelching sound, she tore the weapon from her head. The axe flew to the ground, and the edge that was in the rat's skull melted. Without thinking twice, the queen raised her paw again and tore her wounded eye out of her head. But soon the eye recovered, as if nothing had happened to it. Having regained full vision, the queen immediately looked at Bart, who then plunged the axe into her skull. Rem immediately became excited and wanted to run to her comrade to protect him. But the queen quickly rushed forward and bit Bart on the hand. Ram, ignoring the rats that were biting her, took out her bow and fired in an attempt to protect her friend. The rats continued to bite her, but the girl did not pay attention and continued to run towards the queen. When there were even more rats around, the girl screamed in irritation, trying to push them away. A panicked Sam shouted for Rain to help them. Lin just froze in place, not hearing anything around him. The only thought in his head was that the black liquid was not water. He immediately remembered himself dying from this liquid, which was a black poison that destroyed the soul. Lin thought that this poison meant that there was a black magician nearby who was empowering the queen. Taking a step back, he thought with excitement that this magician was somewhere nearby. Sam jumped up and grabbed Rain by the shoulder, shaking him to come to his senses. When Lin looked at him, Sam asked the guy what was wrong with him. He told him that he can't use offensive magic, so Rain is the only one who can fight. Sam shouted at the boy, begging him to help. Lin had cold sweat running down his face, his expression darkening immediately as Sam shouted that he didn't want to lose his friends. Lin looked around randomly and noticed that Rem was still trying to deal with the rats that surrounded her. Bart was clearly losing the fight with the queen, who also had his hand in her teeth and had already knocked him to the ground. Finally, Lin said something, but Sam couldn't hear him. The boy repeated his question, asking the man how much they would get if they killed her. A little confused, Sam answered him, saying that they would get about 20 gold. The guy still had sweat running down his face as he exclaimed that it was almost 1,000 regular spider rats. He nevertheless agreed and with a quick movement launched an arrow with a spell at the queen. The spell, as soon as it hit the victim's body, immediately worked, exploding and tearing apart her flesh. Lin walked out in front of the now wounded queen and called out to her, calling her an ass with hands. Holding out his hand with a fire spell, he desperately screamed at her to attack, and he would make a roast out of her. Lin summoned another spell onto his hands and slammed his palms together, causing a bright flash to occur. The guy opened his arms, causing a bright light to fill the entire space, causing Sam to close his eyes. The rat also couldn't stand such a bright light, and she covered her eyes with her paws. Almost unconscious from blood loss, Rem noticed that the rats that surrounded her fell to the ground from the bright light, and she was caught by a root. The light went out and the root quickly threw Ram and Bart aside. The boys fell to the ground next to Sam. Lin, who was in front, shouted at the man to take care of them. Without waiting for an answer, the boy called the other adventurers and told them that if they wanted the healer to return alive and help everyone, they had to protect him. Rem lay tiredly on the ground in her own blood, looking around. Having resolved the situation a little, Lin shouted to the queen that he would deal with her himself. The wound that the explosion had inflicted on the queen began to heal, becoming covered in black poison again. And suddenly, with a loud sound, a new whole paw burst out of the rat's flesh. Taking a deep breath to calm himself, Lin noticed that the rat was missing one leg, but it didn't seem to care. Deciding to act a little differently, the boy rushed forward, casting a spell as he went. He quickly ran past the rats and behind him, the spell exploded. Getting closer to the queen, Lin began to cast a spell again. The queen wanted to hit him with her paw, but the guy managed to dodge. Sliding on the ground, the boy said that he was using the spell's power at full capacity. But the spell was never cast. The queen struck again with her paw, which distracted the guy, forcing him to dodge. Landing a little to the side, Lin thought that there was no guarantee that 3-star level magic would work, and there was also a limit to the power he could use, and he forced himself to calm down. The guy decided that first of all, he needed to understand the enemy, and he decided to use Belsidius. Looking at the queen, Lin noticed that many dark spirits were crowded around her. The boy noticed that it was 3-star level dark magic. The regular rats didn't stop attacking, but Lin still managed to come to his senses and dodge. The boy extended his hand and cast a spell, causing a thin twig to wrap around a tree branch. Pulling himself up, he thought that there was too much poison and his body could not handle such a dose. He thought that if he couldn't remove it with Bel Curious, then he would have to use 4th-tier magic. But he immediately thought that it was too reckless, and if he failed, it would be the end. He couldn't forget that there was a dark mage somewhere nearby, and the risk was too great, and Rem was watching Rain. She couldn't help but notice how the guy's face distorted in painful thoughts. The girl slowly rose from the ground where she was lying. Sam looked at her in surprise. He worriedly told the girl that she should not get up and that she needed to stop the bleeding, to which the girl objected, saying that she was fine. Sam tried to say something else, but the girl interrupted him with a loud scream. She looked at her comrade and, in a calm voice and with a smile on her face, told him to take care of Bart. And the girl again entered the battle with the monsters, mercilessly making her way through. Running past one of the adventurers who asked her if she was okay, she yelled at him not to ask questions and to focus on the fight. Lin still couldn't come up with a solution, thinking that nothing would work. Deciding that he should retreat first, he noticed that something had flown into the tree he was sitting on. Looking to the side, the boy noticed with fear in his eyes that it was the eyeball of a monster. Looking back at the queen, Lin noticed that she was throwing her own children at him. The next such projectile hit exactly the branch on which Lin was sitting. It broke, and the guy flew down. When the boy fell to the ground, the queen immediately rushed to attack him, but he managed to use a spell, summoning a stone shield. Meanwhile, the sound of a shot was heard again, and the arrow again hit the queen's eye. The rat took the arrow out of its eye and looked in the direction it came from, breaking the arrow into small pieces. Completely exhausted, Ram told the rat that she shouldn't have ignored her and now she would pay for it. With a furious cry, the queen now rushed at the girl who dared to attack her. While everyone around was shouting at the girl to run away, she just dropped her bow on the ground and thought that it was not time yet. Almost falling off her feet, the girl thought only about how she had to stand firm. Noticing that his comrade was in danger, Lin immediately jumped to his feet to cast a spell. Throwing a small dagger, Rem shouted at the guy to finally pull himself together. The dagger hit the queen in the eye, causing her to lose her balance, and Rem was able to jump on her. Looking at the guy, she desperately shouted to him that he would cope with everything. Lin hid behind a rock and tried again to calm himself and concentrate. A first-level spell glowed between his palms with a dim red light. As Lin worked with a tense face, the triangles in the spell grew larger and larger, and the light grew brighter. Rem was trying her best to resist the queen who was desperately chasing after her, and Lin couldn't believe that something had thrown him off balance like that. The girl lost her last strength and could no longer move. She fell down without the ability to do anything, and at that very moment the queen struck her. Sam wanted to rush to his girlfriend, but the other adventurers who were supposed to protect him stopped him. Lin couldn't help but hear these desperate cries, but he still tried to stay focused on the matter at hand. Still, Sam managed to escape the other's grasp and quickly ran forward. Rem lay almost unconscious on the ground. The Rat Queen swung her paws to finally kill her. The paws hit the ground, but Sam appeared at the very last moment and managed to quickly drag the girl away. Grabbing her by the collar, he shook her, asking if she shouldn't come back alive. They must all come back to smile at each other again. Sam began using his healing spells on Rem, telling her to stop being a hero. The girl put her hand on the guy's shoulder and quietly apologized to him. Smiling, she told him that when they returned, she would definitely write him a letter with the changes. After finishing healing the girl, Sam and she stood up to re-enter the fight. But before they could take a single step, a wall of fire appeared in front of them. It was a fire spell that consisted of 4 triangles, and the queen's body immediately burst into flames. Fire raged around all the adventurers, surprisingly only affecting the monsters. They all burned very brightly in this flame, the spell of which was a mathematical equation that needed to be solved, and it consisted of 14 polynomials and 7 rational equations. When Lin finished solving the equation, fire immediately surrounded the queen. And when the fire found its victim, a huge explosion immediately occurred. The entire mountain was illuminated by a bright column of flame. The force of this explosion was so great that all the adventurers who were nearby were sent flying in different directions. Soon the fire died out, leaving only sparks behind. Rem woke up and looked forward. The girl noticed that the queen's body had burned to such an extent that only a pile of coal remained. Sitting behind the rock, Lin smiled sadly and noted that it was pathetic. Feeling incredibly tired, he said that before he could use such a spell 7 times in a row, all that remained of the queen finally turned into ashes, which were carried away by the wind. The normal rats turned back into less dangerous creatures. The red light disappeared from their eyes, as did their confidence in victory. The rats jumped to their feet and, frightened by the huge number of people, ran away. While the other adventurers chased the rats, Sam ran towards Bart, who was still lying on the ground. Rem couldn't help but notice that this sinister queen was killed with 1 shot. Sam knelt down in front of brother and exclaimed that he would help right away, and Rem felt her head spin. The girl asked the guy how their friend was, and he replied that he had a strong constitution, so he would recover without any problems. Bart, who had come to, apologized to the girl and asked her how she was, to which she replied that she was fine. She said that this time luck was on their side. She noted that now they would know that queens regenerate, and such information is not even in the database of the Adventurers Association. Remembering that the queen died with 1 shot, the girl immediately remembered Reina. Lin, meanwhile, lay unconscious, his back leaning against a rock. The sun sank below the horizon. The comrades ran up to the guy and examined him. Sam said that he just ran out of mana. He would rest and everything would be fine. Rem noted that he had spent all his strength. Sam said that this magic was definitely done by rain, and the girl replied that she thought so too. She asked why he was hiding behind the rock then, since the queen was attacking from that direction, and he did not need cover. And if he had revealed himself, his name would have been on everyone's lips. Sam told her that this was not the most important thing now, and they would talk about it later. The girl did not argue with him. Lin dreamed of moments from his life. One day he told his comrades not to write down the name. He said that he had already said that he did not want to join the ranks of the team of heroes. They could convey this to His Majesty, to which the officials said that he could not understand this, because this was the decree of the ruler, the date to honor those who sacrifice themselves for humanity. Esther asked why he was acting like that. Did he really not like them? Frida asked him if he was joking, adding that he was being a troublemaker and going too far. But suddenly the guy screamed at the top of his lungs that it wasn't because of that. He said he was not like them. Frida's face twisted into an irritated grimace. Lin said he doesn't carry the same evil fate as Frida and Kay's. He continued by saying that he had no mission to fulfill like Esther. Clenching his fists, he exclaimed that he did not give his all for someone because of his pride, and that the fact that they were here together was just a simple coincidence. He said that because he had no right to put his name in, otherwise their reputation would go down the drain. The team members looked at each other, and then they laughed loudly. Kay's, as usual, ruffled the guy's hair. Frida began to say through her laughter that he was just a cutie. Esther, relieved, told him not to worry about it, and an irritated Lin exclaimed, waving it off, that he had not worried, but had come to the conclusion with the brains in his head. Taking the boy by the hand, Esther told him, no matter what others say, he was and is part of the team. He doesn't have to worry about self-sacrifice and other things. He can do whatever he wants. She told him with a smile that this world had already recognized him as the archmage of the team of heroes. After some time, Lin woke up and found himself on Bart's back, with the city lights shining nearby. Looking around, the guy asked where he was. Rem noticed that he was already awake, and she said that the school was already nearby, so they returned to the Golden Rose. Relaxing, Lin felt his whole body ache and thought that he had overdone it. But fortunately, they went unnoticed by the Black Mage. Bart asked the guy if he was the one who used that fire magic. Lin didn't answer, and Rem told him not to dare lie to them because they would definitely find out everything. After a short silence, Lin said that he had nothing to hide, and the girl said that she knew it. She said that they thought he would want to keep it a secret, so they wrote in the report that they used a scroll bought from a peddler. She asked him if there was anything that needed to be corrected, to which the guy replied that everything was fine. He was satisfied with this version. Rem told him that it seemed like he had his own reasons for keeping it a secret, so she wouldn't pry into his soul, but he still saved them, so they owed him. The guy tried to cut everything off, saying that they didn't have any debt. Sam suggested to his comrades that they give the entire reward to Rain, and they readily agreed. Looking out, Lin still noticed a strange expression on Rem's face and asked her what was wrong with her face. Didn't she say that justice was her specialty? He asked her if she really expected him to say that they were all great and offer to share the reward, to which she replied that there was no harm in dreaming, and everyone laughed. Lin dropped to the ground and said that they could give him 5 gold pieces and split the rest, but Bart objected, saying that it would be fairer to give him everything. The guy continued to persist and said that he hadn't done anything special, so he could only take the amount he needed, but they replied that they hadn't done anything special either. While Bart and Lin were arguing, Rem intervened in the conversation. She said that she and Bart were going to be the best adventurers, and since he was arguing, he could invest the money in them. She asked him how he liked the idea, and he said with a smile that it was not bad. Sam intervened in the conversation and asked Rain if he remembered asking him about terrain. Sam shook his head and said that when he was studying, he heard some things, but they were just rumors. Leaning towards the boy, he whispered in his ear that it seemed like she had been practicing black magic in her later years. A couple of minutes later, Lin said goodbye to his comrades, remaining in the square. When they turned around, the smile slowly slid off the guy's face. Back at the dorm, Lin began to thoughtfully flip through the book. After looking through it, he noticed that it certainly didn't contain any information about Terena having anything to do with black magic. Looking at the book in his hand, memories came back to his mind. In some ruined city 300 years ago, Lin looked at all that remained. Hearing a rustle, the boy grabbed his staff and began to climb the stairs. Climbing up, he slowly looked into one of the destroyed houses. And there, in the ruined city, among the houses that were half buried in the swamp, he found Terena. Finding some boards and tearing up some books, Lin started a fire with a snap of his fingers. As he rose to his feet, he heard the sound of a rumbling stomach behind him. The guy's hand reached into the bag. The frightened girl became even more afraid and began to shake even more. But to her surprise, the guy sat down in front of her and handed her a loaf of bread. Lin told her to eat if she was hungry and not to worry. He wouldn't ask for money or anything else. Esther and Kays, also walking through this ruined city, noticed smoke from a fire. Lin noticed that the girl had not even touched the bread, and he told her that she had better eat since he had nothing else. Suddenly, Terena quietly said that everyone had disappeared. Her friends, family, loved ones had disappeared. Lin asked her if her village had no contact with the outside world at all. The girl replied that she didn't know, which made the boy just sigh. Standing up, he said that he didn't even know such a village existed, but that was understandable since it was a distant outskirts. He said it was sad that there was no one left except her who could remember this place. Terena buried her face in her knees, and Lin said that no one would remember her life, which was not bad. He said that if she died, this place would disappear without a trace. Gritting her teeth, the girl exclaimed that she didn't want that. Then Lin came closer to her again and brought the bread to her, telling her to eat it then. He told her that even if she didn't want to, she needed to eat to survive. He told her not to forget the people who lived here, because there was no one else to do it. Terena snatched the bread from the boy's hands and greedily bit into the loaf, bursting into tears. Since then, Terena has followed Lin. Later, he and his team discovered that she had magical abilities. Having drawn the spell on a piece of paper, the girl directed it towards the sky, and when the spell worked, Rain came from the sky. The girl turned around with a cheerful smile. Lin never thought that she would ever become a great magician. One day, when the girl was already asleep, Esther suggested leaving her in the church in the next village. Frida agreed with this, because they would expose her to even greater danger if they took her with them. Lin was not against this proposal. He knew that the girl already had the necessary magic, with the help of which she could survive alone, relying only on her own strength. But until the day of their separation, he tirelessly taught her everything, and she obediently obeyed. Terena lived stubbornly and did not complain about anything. Lin taught her to put out small fires. They also learned to use earth magic to save those who fell. It was magic that could help all people. One day, Frida asked the guy if he really liked this child or if it was some kind of youth hobby. Esther asked if it was true, to which Lin only said that they were talking some nonsense again. But the guy still cared about her. Although he couldn't understand whether it was pity or sympathy, perhaps he was drawn to her because she had to face the same difficulties as he did. But they couldn't do it forever, and the day came when they had to say goodbye. Lin could see that his student was sad, but, to his own surprise, he was able to say goodbye to her calmly, without any particular emotion. The team decided to leave the village immediately, otherwise they would have felt uneasy, and Terena was taken to the church. The pastor told her that this was now her new home. The building might be a bit big, but she would soon get used to it. He told her that from now on she had nothing to worry about. They were her family now. But Terena replied that they were not her family, and this was not her home. Her family was her mentor, and a spell began to shine in the girl's palms. After some time, another church minister came out and told the pastor that they had finished processing the new disciple. But the man was surprised to find that the pastor was tied to the column by his roots. He asked him if that new disciple had done it, and he said that he would send for her at once, to which he received the answer that everything was all right. He sighed and thought that there was no need to search. They should just leave it. And he himself thought about how to get it taken down as soon as possible. Before leaving, Terena smiled at the pastor and said that she should be with her mentor. After a while, Lin turned around, hearing someone shouting behind him. As it turned out, it was Terena, who had managed to catch up with her mentor and his comrades. When Lin asked her what happened, she said that she escaped using the magic he taught her. Bowing, she screamed and asked the guy to take her with him, and she exclaimed that she would not cause any trouble. Lin's comrades looked at each other as if expecting something like this while the girl begged. Finally, the guy agreed, but said that they would not be together until the very end. Coming closer, he shouted, asking her what it meant that she escaped with magic. Did it mean that she harmed a person? The girl quickly replied that it was not so. And then Lin turned around, telling her not to forget that magic was not created to harm people. So Terena became part of the team, and over time her talent gradually began to emerge. It was a little hectic and restless, but this child's abilities surprised Lin. The girl's innate gift began to develop in different areas under the guidance of team members. She was like a sponge that absorbed knowledge regarding magic and new techniques. She also worked with Esther, who broke a huge boulder as an example. Terena shook her head, refusing to try it. Although the girl was stubborn, she continued to develop her skills, and so she went on a mission with Kaze. Terena had grown to the point where she could take on powerful monsters and was accepted as a member of the team. One evening, Esther returned to camp with a pile of bags and a wide smile on her face. As it turned out, the girls bought new clothes for the new member of their team. Lin took out a hat and asked her if she wanted one, and then he said with a grin that she would get it only when she defeated him. So the days and months passed, and their journey was coming to an end. In the final battle with the Abyss, the girl's strength increased significantly. She lay in the middle of the rubble, but there was a triumphant smile on her face because she had managed to take the hat. One day, the team of heroes stopped in the territory occupied by the Abyss. Lin told his student that she should stay here, in their base. The girl jumped up, not understanding why she couldn't go with the whole team. She exclaimed that she would fight. Esther exclaimed that they knew what the girl was capable of. She could help, but the team agreed with Lin. She told her that they couldn't take her with them because it was dangerous. Then Terena turned to Kaze and Frida to say something, but they only remained silent. Terena clenched her little fists and said that they had been through so much together and it was just too unfair to leave her here alone. Rising from the table, Lin told her that she was too small and that the enemies they would face were very dangerous. Ruffling his hand through her hair, he told her that they had originally started this adventure as a foursome, and that it was now over for her. But he told her not to worry because they weren't abandoning her. As he walked away, he told her that he would return and continue teaching her magic. When everyone had already come out of their shelter, Terena shouted that she agreed. With tears in her eyes, she cried out that she would look forward to seeing him. And so his journey with Terena ended. Lin now could not understand why she got involved with black magic, and it was also very suspicious that all the books with her were censored. Lin opened the book from which Rudian flew out. Rudian sat on the guy's head, and he noticed that his progress had increased by a whole 2%. As he leafed through the book, he wondered if they had gotten any better after destroying that rat. But in any case, there was still a lot to do. His gaze fell on one page, which had a drawing of Lin on it, and at the bottom was the caption, "The coolest mentor ever." Lin chuckled and wondered out loud when the little one had managed to do that. But suddenly a realization struck him, and the smile slowly slid off his face. Meanwhile, at dawn, at the place where the battle with the queen took place, a man in a green cloak kicked the ground and shouted that he thought it would reduce the number of adventurers and reveal the golden children to them. To which his comrade noted that there was still a lot of fiery ash left, and the explosion radius was huge, so it was at least 4th level magic. Those adventurers who fought the rats with Lin, Ram, Bart, and Sam were now hanging limply from the branches of the tree. One of the cloaked men said that if they were telling the truth, then it was Ram and Bart, and his comrade shouted that they would take revenge, he would gut both of them and hang them by their guts. The second man in the cloak said that this way he would leave material evidence for the golden children, that they were in the south. It was impossible to destroy the case just by starting it, to which his less patient comrade irritably kicked the rat's corpse. To begin with, they need to focus not on the place, and then the first asked him about that. And on what then? The second said that they should report everything to Terrain. The next day, Lin went to the Magic Development Club and greeted his clubmates. At the main table in the auditorium stood the head of the club, who noticed that the number of participants had increased. The leader greeted him and said that his name was Juan, and that he was the chairman of the Magic Development Club. He said that he didn't expect so many listeners to come, so he was very surprised. But he couldn't help but be happy, and he hoped that they would all get along. Joan said that he would now talk about the club's purpose and objectives. The guy started talking about how they were studying magic for the development of the area and agriculture, when suddenly his speech was interrupted by the appearance of another participant. Somewhat irritated, Logan walked into the classroom without saying anything. The guy reluctantly said hello and introduced himself. Joan was a little confused, but immediately said that he came just in time. Waving his hand nervously, he told him to sit in any empty seat. Looking around the audience, Logan noticed that there was only one empty seat left, which was next to Rain. Shuffling through his papers, Joan exclaimed that they should change their tune then. Lin snidely asked Logan if he kept his promise, to which he replied that he was just following the rules. Joan continued to talk enthusiastically about his club, occasionally drawing something on the board. Lin couldn't help but think that there was a black mage nearby, and he wasn't sure he could defeat him again in his current state. Rudian flew out of his pocket and showed his stats, where his magic power was 12,564 and his physical power was 311. Lin thought that he needed to strengthen his body as soon as possible. He thought that without training this could not be achieved, and he thought that it would be great if someone helped him. As he thought about this, his gaze immediately turned to Logan, who was sitting next to him. After some time, Logan and Lin moved to the gym, where Lin tried to do push-ups and Logan harshly scolded him. An irritated Lin tried to keep himself in his stance, under the indignant shouts of the other guy, and thought only about how he would shut up. But if he wants to develop physical strength, then he needs to listen to the guy. Then in the audience, Lin asked him to help with training, to which Logan replied that he did not understand. Didn't he defeat him then? Why should he learn anything from the loser? Lin asked him why he was refusing so quickly. He was the best in the group at building muscle mass. Logan annoyedly told him that he had indeed lost the confrontation, so he could ignore him. But he has no reason to treat the entire faculty with contempt. Tapping his finger on the book, Lin told him that he didn't have time to make fun of others, and it seemed he didn't understand, so he would say it straight. Lin told him that he was strong, so he asked him for help. He said this without sarcasm, and had personally seen it, and he was surprised that someone at such a young age had achieved this. Not understanding the part about being young, Logan still thanked her for the compliment. The guy told him that a strong body is the foundation, but he doesn't have it. He said he wanted to devote time to training but not waste it, which meant training under the most promising person in the field. After receiving compliments, Logan finally agreed, saying that no one was better at this than him, but he still told him that he couldn't, and that he should ask others. Lin immediately exclaimed that it was not free, and he could pay, to which the other said that was not the point. Logan sighed and replied that he was from a great family of mages, and he was a student of one of the 8 schools. They were enemies. How can they ask each other for help? Lin didn't answer him, but only called him by name. Opening his eyes, the boy noticed that another one was pointing a finger at him with a spell. Lin fired theatrically, causing no damage to his neighbor. Without any emotion, Lin told him that he was lucky. Lin said that if he had thought the same way, the guy would have been dead in that fight. The fact that he stopped and did not kill him suggests that they are not enemies. They are not warriors, but students. And this is not a battlefield, but an academy. Lin put his hand on the boy's shoulder and told him that they were not enemies, but colleagues studying magic spells together. Finally, Logan couldn't find what to say to this, although he himself couldn't believe it. After Lin finally finished the set, Logan told him that he was surprised because he didn't think he would do it, to which Lin responded that he was sincere. Logan told him to get up for another exercise, so the guy asked him to lift him, which the other guy immediately refused. He asked what would happen when someone saw them. They would laugh. Lin asked him if he really thought about it all the time, if he really needed muscles just for beauty. He told him with a smirk to get rid of everyone who said nasty things. Logan smiled and took his hand to lift him up and told him he was right. Owen stood behind the wall and listened to their conversation with a smile. Suddenly, a woman's scream was heard. As it turned out, Krista entered the hall and, noticing the guys together, asked what they were doing. She assumed that they were fighting again, but they dispelled her assumptions, saying that they were training, but the girl could not believe it. Logan, ignoring the girl, handed his student the magical protein and told him to drink it. Krista asked Rain if he was crazy for humiliating him before, and an irritated Logan asked her if she couldn't see that they were busy. The girl continued to scream, not believing that they had become such friends. Owen came up to her from behind and put his hand on her shoulder, saying that the girl always made a lot of noise. Hearing a familiar voice, the girl immediately calmed down and froze. Logan asked the professor what brought him there, to which he merely replied that he had seen a group of monkeys when he passed by, and that he had an official message for them. He said with a serious face that this was not good news. As it turned out, the man came to tell them that it was time for midterm exams. Lin couldn't understand why this was bad news. Krista told him that at Delaith these were not normal exams. She said that this is, in fact, the same as the transition to a new stage of life. There will be those who will be able to break through and those who will fall behind. Owen reminded that Delayton's ideology is one of endless competition. Turning around, he said that those who did not comply would be expelled. Returning to his room, Lin lay down on his bed. Rudian flew out of the book again, and the boy thought about what he needed to check, what he needed to do before the exams. But suddenly he noticed that Rudian looked strange. He was blurry. When Rudian became normal, everything around him was illuminated with a bright light. Looking around, Lin discovered that he was no longer in his room. A message appeared stating that the research progress of unique magic was now 40%. Confirmation of a new magical power scheme has begun. A message appeared that the mental barter is being detailed. The holy stream is within a radius of 20 meters from the magician. Lin noticed that some kind of glowing sign appeared on his hand. Now the success rate when using unique equations and runes increased to 33%, and the power to 66%. But the required amount of magic power to understand was 20,000, while the guy only had 12,564. The activation imprint for using the mental barrier was determined. Blinking again, Lin found that he was back in his room. He realized that he had now reached a mental barrier due to the fact that he had reached 40% mastery. The mental barrier was a secret technique that even among the sages, only 2 could use. The guy thought with anticipation that this was simply incredible. He wrapped his hand with the sign in bandages, hiding it. Once he got out into the city, he headed straight to the black market. Humming the song joyfully, he thought that so much had happened in the last few days that he was almost going crazy. Suddenly, he crashed into someone's large back. He immediately apologized, rubbing his bruised nose. Suddenly, he realized that the voices in front of him sounded very familiar. As it turned out, he met Ram, Bart, and Sam by chance. Bart grabbed the guy and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and Rem noted that it had only been a couple of days. Bart immediately threw Rain over his shoulder, to Rem's loud laughter. Having grabbed the guy, the team immediately decided to go on a new mission. Lin shouted at them to stop, asking them what they were doing. Rem cheerfully replied that the students were very busy and they were all going together, so this was the fastest way.